All righty. Well, welcome back, everyone, and welcome to this next segment, in which this is part 5 of a 7-part series. Wow, how time is flying, that Sailesh is leading every week here on the Collective Intelligence Block Party. And this is, the series is called Healing the Planet, or How Not to Go Extinct. And this 5th part is on the spiritual, addressing the spiritual aspects of transformation to a compassionate civilization. And with that, I turn it over to our beloved, our very own Dr. Sailesh Rao. Love you, Sailesh. Welcome, and please take it away.
Thank you so much, Jamin. So let me share my presentation. Well, we live in interesting times, don't we? This is fascinating what's going on. Anyway, this is the 5th in this series, Healing the Planet, How Not to Go Extinct. And it's about the spiritual transformation that's happening. We will have the recordings for the other 4. I mean, all of them will be on our website once I've compiled all of them, So there's 2 more to go. Economy is next week, and then personal is on April 10th. I want to begin by telling you what I see as spirituality, And I see it from Gandhi's perspective, because Gandhi said, truth is God. In fact, enlightenment is about seeing the truth as is, seeing reality as is. So in that sense, I think it's very much aligned with what we were taught in engineering. How do you align your work with nature? How do you align your work with the truth? So I'm looking at it from that perspective. Okay? So spirituality to me is about seeing reality as is, seeing everyone is connected, which is the reality. I was brought up in the Hindu tradition, which is based on the foundation that everything happens for the best, that we are part of something much larger, that there is a larger intelligence at play. And we may not see everything right away, but we have to have faith that everything will work out eventually, that we will figure out what this is all about, right? So that's the idea behind everything happens for the best. And one of the main sayings in the Bhagavad Gita is that the truth never isn't. The truth is what is implemented, whereas the untruth never is. So when we say something that's not true, then you can never make it a reality. So that's the foundation. And I would say that until, say, 2009, I was more or less an atheist. I didn't believe this. I mean, I was taught all this, but I didn't buy it. I was a scientist and an engineer, and I was looking at everything from a very scientific perspective. So very questioning perspective. So until someone is proven to me, I didn't want to believe it, right? And so in 2009, I was in this forest in India, and I had this feeling of perfection. So I was in awe of nature as a systems designer, because I think nature is this extremely resilient and efficient system that's built in. Every animal belongs exactly as they should. Every tree, every insect is doing their part. So I was in awe of this, in this forest, and so I went to the owners of the forest and I asked them. It was basically a couple from New Jersey that was doing this. And I asked them, what did you do to make this happen? And they said, oh, nothing. We just tore down the fences and gave it back to the animals, and the animals did everything. They just came and dropped seeds and new trees were born. I said, that's it? That's all you have to do? I said, well, we had to do one more thing. We had to patrol the land and make sure that no human being comes inside. And at that point, I felt like I didn't really belong in nature. That we were the only species that doesn't belong. You take human beings out and nature is perfectly fine without us. And it's very difficult to have that feeling, right? When you think that you don't really belong in your own birthplace, because I was born in this forest. So I was very depressed. And I came home, came back to the US, and thinking about it. And then my son announced that they're going to have a baby. He and his girlfriend are going to have a baby. And so that baby was born in 2010, Kimaya. And she literally changed my life because she made me see this from a different perspective. See, if you look at any animal, you see an animal doing things that seem destructive, right? But at some point, the animal stops doing that. Like elephant is breaking branches of trees and it makes it look like the elephant is being destructive in the forest. But something tells the elephant to stop. And then you realize that wherever the elephant broke the branches of trees, that's where the sunlight streams and nourishes the underbrush. So even though it looked destructive, it actually had a constructive interpretation from a larger picture, right? So what my granddaughter did to me was to make me go back and look at everything that we have done as human beings and see it from this perspective. Is it part of the elephant breaking branches of trees? This is the equivalent of that. Because when she was born, when she was like a month old, I was holding her in my arms and she looked up at me and she smiled, right? And I immediately said, she belongs exactly as she is. We all must belong exactly as we are. And you can see, that's her as a 1-year-old wearing a butterfly outfit. And that's what she is now. And so during her entire life, she's been teaching me to look at things from a different perspective. Not to see us as this continuously destructive species, but as a species that's in the act of doing something for a larger good. Just like the elephant is in the act of destroying the tree for a larger good. But the elephant did not know what it was. But something in nature told the elephant to stop. Just like something in nature is now telling us to stop. Yeah? It's actually, she's made us stop. We are sitting like in a cocoon, like in the chrysalis phase. And the animals are coming in from the outside and looking at us and saying, hey, where are these people? Right? So we have been put into a cocoon now, And so we need to look at these things from a very realistic perspective. And that's what the virus is actually teaching us. You cannot deal with the virus by pretending it's not happening. It is forcing us to look at the truth. Just like Richard Feynman, when he was examining the rocket problem and what happened there and why the Challenger blew up, he realized that people were trying to market the problem out of existence. Saying, okay, we can ship it, we can let it go because otherwise, we won't get our next budget for the next year. So it was not based on science. It was not based on reality. The decisions were made based on public relations. So he said, reality must always take precedence over public relations because nature cannot be fooled. Nature is about implementing the truth exactly as is. And that's, I think, where we have been remiss so far. See, because we say something, but we do the opposite. So in 2011, we signed this Interfaith Declaration on Climate Change, and we handed it to Christiana Figueres, the executive secretary of the UN at that time. So there were lots of religious leaders who came together to do this, and I happened to be there, so I was brought in as part of the group. And you can see Desmond Tutu had signed it. All these religious leaders had signed it. They're all from South Africa. And basically, we said there in an addendum that while climate change is a symptom, the fever that our Earth has contracted, the underlying disease is the disconnection from creation, or the disconnection from nature that plagues human societies throughout our Earth. And we, the undersigned, pledge to heal this disconnection by promoting and exemplifying compassion for all creation in all our actions. And every religious leader there said, yes, this is part of our religion. Compassion for all creation is the foundation of our religion. And then a couple of days later, I got a call from the secretary of Desmond Tutu. And the secretary said, Desmond is concerned, but did he sign on to go vegan by signing that declaration? Because he loves his chicken. Okay? So I realized at that point, even our leaders are not practicing what they preach. They're saying one thing, but doing the opposite. They know that they have to go vegan, because when he signed it, he realized that he had to go vegan, right? He's asking me for clarification. I said, why are you asking me? He knows he should be doing whatever he thinks is right, right? Basically, that's where I think we become misaligned. Our intentions are correct. Everything we write about, everything we say are correct, but we don't do it. And now the virus is making us do it. And this brings us in alignment with our true nature, really. A prayer for compassion, in the movie we showed, it's part of everyone's inner structure. Compassion is within us. In fact, whenever I ask the question, would you ever deliberately hurt an innocent animal unnecessarily? Everybody says no, you would never do that. So that means that compassion is at the core of our being. Compassion for all life. And veganism is at the core of our being. That's who we really are. So when we are going vegan, it's not like we are doing something extraordinary. We're just coming home to who we are. And along the way, when you're coming home to who we are, we do stumble. But when we stumble, we have to get up and keep going. Make sure that you don't lose sight of the destination. Okay? Because that's where we are headed. All of us are headed there. And all of the religious declarations on climate change talk about this. Like in the Laudato Si, Pope Francis wrote, our sister, the earth, now cries out to us because of the harm we have inflicted by her irresponsible use and abuse of the goods with which God has endowed us. So it's saying that this had been given to us and we misused it. So in a way, it is telling a story of us not belonging, right? And we need to switch that around. So in the Islamic declaration also, it says that our species, though selected to be a caretaker or steward on the planet, has been the cause of such corruption and devastation on it that we are in danger of destroying life as we know it on our planet. So this again makes it seem like we are outside this creation and we are doing things to it that is contrary to what God has told us to do. So in a way, like, the elephant is destroying the trees, right? That's the imagery. Even the Hindu Declaration of the Planet, in Hindu Declaration on Climate Change, it talks about the same thing, that our exploitation of the planet has caught up with us. Radical change is needed. It's no longer an option. It's a matter of survival. Right? So these kind of stories make it seem like that phase was not part of who we really are. But because of what Kimaya did to me, I was looking for a story in which that phase is also part of who we really are. That phase in which we were destroying the planet is part of our larger plan. There's a larger plan at play that we can look back and see, oh yeah, that was necessary for us to do what we have to do now. Because what the coronavirus is doing is now helping us take care of each other first. So because you cannot heal the earth until we heal ourselves first as a species. So literally we can only manage this coronavirus pandemic if we are good at taking care of each other. Okay? Otherwise it's going to be just overwhelm our hospital system, and there's going to be a lot of suffering. Okay, so it's forcing us to first take care of ourselves, not only our friends and family, but everyone among us. You know, suddenly now we know that there is plenty of shelter for homeless people. We found them, right? We're putting them in hotel rooms because there is no one traveling to the hotel rooms in the first place. So it has made us change our lives so that we are now forced to take care of each other. And the next thing is going to be food. What kind of food are people going to get? So the people who don't have money, who don't have jobs, who are sitting there saying, how am I going to feed myself? So we have a responsibility to cook food for them and bring it to them and give it to them so that they, so this is the next phase in this chrysalis that we are in. Where we learn how to take care of each other. We learn how to take care of our sick and our elderly. Then we'll graduate to become the butterfly species. So I see this as the metamorphosis. I mean, literally, just like we don't know how the caterpillar knows to stop eating and get into the chrysalis phase. Now we are finding out as human beings, you know, we were in the caterpillar phase and nature sent a signal. Now we're in the chrysalis phase. And we look back and say, that's really what happened. Okay? And in the chrysalis phase, as we take care of each other, we will become butterfly species, a caretaker species that takes care of the earth, not as dominators, but as caretakers. Because ultimately, that's sustainability. You know, our core guiding principle is that compassion for all life is infinitely sustainable. So to get to a sustainable civilization, we have to be a compassionate civilization, compassionate to all life. And life is like that. You know, life is designed that way. Life creates conditions conducive to life. So life has these feedback processes in place that make sure that life thrives. So, and it's much, much bigger than we are. You know, we think of ourselves as this self-important species, but we really are not. We are just part of a larger fabric, and we were woven into that larger fabric. And the larger fabric has intelligence that is far greater than ours. So who thought? I mean, when I wrote my books, I was using the analogy of the caterpillar and the butterfly, but I never thought it would happen literally like this. So it's just eye-opening to witness what's going on. So the hypothesis that we came up with, and this is directly a result of Kimaya turning my head around and making me look at it this way, is that we are the climate regulators of planet Earth. And we have been doing something, just like the elephant was doing something that was for the good of the forest, when it was breaking the branches of trees, we were doing something that was for the good of the planet. And that was to prevent the Earth from ever going back to another ice age. And so you can see that, you know, it is part of a larger plan, at least it makes sense as part of a larger plan in which we prevented the Earth from going back to another ice age in the current interglacial period, which is exactly like the interglacial period that happened 3 ice ages ago. Rather than going down into another ice age, we kept the temperature constant. And we kept the temperature constant, and then we used fossil fuels to figure out what we did, without which we wouldn't know. And now, rather than continuing to do what we are doing, we are being forced, actually literally forced to do this instead. Because you see the emissions have gone down by 30%, I think, they estimate. 30% in what? 2 weeks? In your wildest dreams, you couldn't have imagined this happening, right? You know, in her wildest dreams, Greta Thunberg couldn't have imagined this happening. but a virus did it. Okay? So emissions have gone down. So the skies are clear. The roads are literally empty. Factories are not working. So we are shutting down all of our unnecessary actions. And we are focusing only on our necessary actions, which is food, shelter, clothing, and taking care of the sick. And I really do believe that at the end of the year, when we count, we will discover that the death rate actually declined this year. If you do it right, the death rate would have declined this year compared to last year because of all the deaths from pollution, all the deaths from car accidents, automobile accidents, all that would have decreased. And of course, we would have deaths from the virus. But I think the other lives saved would compensate for it. So looking back and saying, okay, well, how did we get into this seemingly messy situation? And it had to do with the fact that we are the only species that washes its food regularly. So when you wash your food regularly, we don't eat soil. And soil is the source of vitamin B12, a very essential micronutrient. And it was discovered only in the 60s, 40s and 60s, right? In 60s, Dorothy Hodgkin won the Nobel Prize for discovering the structure of vitamin B12. And it's only after this that we knew that washing food was responsible for removing a micronutrient that's essential for our survival. Before that, we were assigning it to all kinds of other things. Okay? We were discovering that if you don't eat animal foods, if you don't eat dairy or meat, you get sickness. Okay? You get anemia, pernicious anemia, they called it. And so people came up with all kinds of religious rituals to make sure that everybody in society got a little bit of animal foods at least once or twice a year during festivals. So like in Hindu festivals, we were asked to make milk sweets and share it with our friends and family. In the Muslim tradition, during Ramadan, you're supposed to do that. You have to slaughter an animal and share it with everybody before you eat yourself. The same in the Christian tradition. So it became like a part of our rituals, religious rituals, to make sure that everyone in society got a little bit of animal foods once or twice a year, so that they got this vital micronutrient that they were missing. So this created a lot of myths about animal foods. Like milk is nectar, is what we were told. It really isn't. Milk is pretty bad food for you once you understand the science of it. And meat is the only source of protein. No, that's not true. There's plenty of protein. There's more protein in some plant foods than there is in animal foods. And this created a system in which we were literally making people sick and then fixing them. So our hospital systems are all because of the way we have created our entire economic paradigm. Otherwise, you won't need so many doctors and so many hospitals. You'll need, some doctors for preventive care, maybe, for advising people. But beyond that, just like bears don't have bear doctors, or deer don't have deer doctors taking care of sick deer, we really should be healthy as normal. Whereas today, we have created a system in which we are by default unhealthy as we grow older. We become ridden with chronic diseases, and then we become part of this hospital system where we are taken care of. So what this virus is teaching us is to look for the root cause of problems and address it at the root cause, because the current system is clearly now at breaking point. We cannot make people deliberately sick and then fix them, because now the hospital system is overwhelmed. So we have to look at all the other people who are coming into the hospital and see, is there a way we can, get rid of their chronic diseases, which goes back to eating vegan food, good vegan food. And then we created all these stories, very symbolic stories, to help us, and make sense of what we were doing. So the story of Krishna is highly symbolic. All of them are symbolic. And if you ask Hindus why they eat butter, they would point to Krishna's stories and say, that's why we eat butter, because Krishna ate butter. Krishna was raised by a cowherd. But Krishna raised a mountain with his little finger in one of his stories. And yet no one goes around lifting mountains with a little finger. Right? So then don't take this story literally. This literally means that, this is the symbolism, is that if you have faith in God, He will shelter you from the trials and tribulations of life. Or He danced on the hood of a 7-headed snake, which means that He overcame his 7 chakras, and He's playing the flute, which means He's making music out of that. The same way, butter signifies the solid mind that has no doubts about God. So the mind of a devotee. Whereas milk is the fluid mind that has doubts about God. To that you add curd, which is the thought of God, and you let it curdle. Then you churn that, you get a solid mind that has no more doubts about God. And that is butter. And this is why Krishna loves butter. And then you take that butter and you clarify it. You get the clarified solid mind that has no more doubts about God, which is the enlightened mind. And this is why we use ghee, the clarified butter, in our arati to signify enlightenment. But enlightenment is about seeing reality as is. And so we know that ghee today, butter today, is highly contaminated because it contains all these chemicals that we have poured into the environment, like dioxins and other toxins. So therefore, when we are offering Krishna, when you're using ghee in our arati, we are literally offering Krishna dioxins. So we should stop doing that. In contrast, coconut oil is one of the purest substances that's known to man, because the coconut tree is a very tall tree, and every tree it filters the water that it takes from the roots. So as the water is brought up to the coconut, it is being filtered every step of the way. So by the time the water reaches the coconut, it's as pure as it can be. This is why during World War II, we use coconut water as a substitute for plasma. Okay? So it's because it is known to be a pure substance. So when you take that coconut, and so in our pujas, we use a leaf, flowers, fruit, and a coconut. So the coconut is here. So the leaf represents our body, the flower represents our mind thinking of God, and the fruit represents our soul. So we're offering our body, mind, and soul to God, and then we break the ego, which is the coconut. And out spills coconut water, which is the fluid mind that has doubts about God, and what is left is the coconut fruit, which is a solid mind that has no more doubts about God. And we take that coconut fruit and you refine it, you get coconut oil, which is the refined solid mind that has no more doubts about God, which is the enlightened mind. So it has exactly the same symbolism as ghee, but it's truly pure. So therefore, it's a substance we should be using in our aratis. So this is how we can veganize all of our rituals for the butterfly phase. We have to go through this and understand and get there. So this is part of the greatest transformation in human history. We are in the middle of it. We have gotten through the first phase. So we're in the second phase, where we have to now figure out all of our systems for normalized nonviolence, so that we can become a caretaker species. And we are the ones who have to do this. We can't expect our leaders, because if you look at our leaders are the leaders in the caterpillar system. And so they were responsible for maintaining that. So we can't expect our leaders to lead us on this. If you look at what Pope Francis ate in New York City, it's exactly the same problem that Desmond Tutu was having. You know, he says the right things, but he doesn't do it because they're stuck in the system. So the detailed shifts that need to happen, we have to let go of, because we know now that we don't need to use animals for any purpose whatsoever. So we have to let go and start implementing what we say correctly. So from animal slavery to animal liberation, from cruelty to animals to compassion for all life, from divisions among us, religious divisions, and to discovering that, you know, all faiths are talking about exactly the same thing. Compassion for all life is at the foundation of all faiths. From an egocentric society to an ecocentric society, and from the fear of death that is causing us to actually sit in the cocoon at the moment to a love of life, you know, and that's the transformation that needs to happen. So we came up with a lot of questions in the Vegan World 2026 conference in 2018, and all of these questions have to be addressed. So we are forming study groups in the Vegan World 2026 project so now we can look at this in the context of where we are now and address these questions. So the shift questions are about how we live now in this phase, in the chrysalis phase. And then the new model questions are about how we live in the next phase after we become butterflies. The deliberations that happened. And here are the new model questions. And the Nature Stewardship Study Group is active. I really think Nature Stewardship will become like a working group, not just a study group, because it is an umbrella activity that is going to encompass a lot of other things that we need to do. So my goal is, you know, to have us start writing like a wiki document on each of these, answering these questions, that people can contribute one by one, and so that we have a cohesive set of principles by which we live going forward. So thank you very much.
Beautiful, Silas. Thank you so much. And welcome to everyone who's recently joined. Silas, I presume you'll lead a discussion, and if you'd like, I can kind of maintain the queue, so you can just focus on the conversation, and I'll take care of whose hand is up when and whatnot. So if you want to give us some guidance for questions or comments, or just let it flow, as you wish. Silas, just give us.
Yeah, I'm just, you know, I'm looking at what's happening now. I'm telling the story from my perspective, and I'm sure each one of you have your own perspective, and we can just discuss how we can come to a common story that we can all go, you know, live with, so that because only through common stories that we start doing things together.
Beautiful. Maida has her hand up.
Hi, Dr. Silage. Hope you're doing good, you and your loved ones. I would like to know, for instance, yesterday I got on the phone with United Food Bank because I'm tired. I'm tired of being home and not feeling enough productive. I'm the type of person that I'm always busy. I'm always doing something. And the more that I serve, the more beautiful feeling that I have. Now, yesterday I did made a few calls and one of them was United Food Bank. And I was thinking to myself, maybe if we can have them start donating the vegetables, because I know a lot of the local farms, they've been donating to them. And then just cooking vegetable broths with what we know it's good to keep our immune system up.
Mhm.
But they told me that as of now, they're only delivering to only assigned places. So from your perspective, what will be like the first step for us to take within this group and start cooking what we know is healthy and putting it out there for the people that have a lack of knowledge?
Right.
What will be good for them?
Yeah, we are working on connecting food sources like United Food Bank or growers with the restaurants who are not working anymore. So a lot of restaurants that are looking for things to do, and then having them cook good food that can be shared in the community. So the idea is, I'm thinking of like a buy one, give one scheme, and make a game out of it. So we're thinking of making a game out of it. So um, people who join the network, so imagine a network that is private, right? So people who join the network, they order soup or food from a restaurant, and these restaurants participate in this buy one, give one scheme. So they advertise what are they going to cook for the day? What is the BOGO meal for the day? Right? It could be a soup, but all of those meals that they cook have to be based on the universal meals principle, using universal meals ingredients, and guarantee that it will reverse diabetes and heart disease, and so it's good food, right? So basically, you're now creating a competition between these restaurants as to who cooks the tastiest universal meal, and they have to then publish their recipe. Okay, so I call it the BOGO meal, and since they're cooking in bulk, so their cost is less, so they can afford for everyone who orders a meal to have one meal given away for free. So the people who are part of the network order the meals, and then there are free soups, free meals that show up outside that people can say, hey, I want that today. I want this today, and I can't afford to pay, so I want to just get the free food. So then the restaurant goes and distributes the food to all the people who have ordered from them at, say, a particular time, 5 o'clock, something like that. And they could use a commercial like DoorDash or one of those services to do that. So then it becomes like much more controlled as to, you're not spreading the contamination, the disease, the infections when you go and deliver. So you could put systems in place for doing that. So this uses the restaurants as the kitchens for the community. It allows us to support people who don't have incomes. Okay, so because some of us have some money, so we can use that to now support our community that is no longer working. So in the old model, people were looking at, this was the motivation for working, is that if you don't work, you're not going to eat. That was the motivation for working, right? It was all fear-based. And today, we are being told to stay home because this way so that you don't infect others. So when we are staying home, we're actually doing something good for the community. So the community has a responsibility to do something good back. And I think the least the community can do is to offer free food. So I was thinking about how do we finance this? And so I came up with this idea. I ran it by a few restaurants, and they're all saying, I'll join. I want this to happen. So we are working on an app for that, initially. So then the United Food Bank could be donating to the restaurants, the vegetables and so on.
Now, what would happen if the governor decides to shut down for everybody, where it's just mandatory for all the restaurants to be closed and nobody gets out, where there's only certain people that can go out to the grocery store and get whatever they want? But I know that when everything gets shut down, all the restaurants closed. So what will happen in that case?
I mean, even in such cases, they will be open. They will leave some kitchens open, because they have to feed the homeless. I mean, people who are in hotels, they have to be fed. So you have to have some places where there are community kitchen facilities available, and they could participate in this. So I don't expect it to get to a point where the only way you can eat is by cooking at home only, and that you have to have money to go and buy from a grocery store. Because then the grocery store becomes the center of infections. See, the way China dealt with it, the way China was able to flatten the curve to a point where there are no more new infections, is that the government figured out how to get food to everybody. Okay? It's unacceptable to shut people up and then not feed them. I don't think that will work at all. So,
do we know what plan did he use for everybody to have meals?
China?
Yeah.
I know that they had trucks and trucks, I mean, lots of trucks coming in every day with food. But I don't have an idea. I don't know what they were feeding them. But everyone got food.
Beautiful, beautiful. All right, we've got 3 folks in the queue. We've got Melissa, followed by Miles, followed by Jamin. And if you want to be in the queue, just raise your hand or make yourself known somehow. Miles, great to see you. Welcome back. Go for it, Miles.
You mean Melissa?
And then,
Melissa.
oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
He keeps forgetting me.
Oh, no,
That's because I'm right here.
I am so sorry.
That's okay.
Melissa, followed by Miles, followed by Jamin, followed by Sarah. Go ahead, sweetheart.
Good thing I'm bossy. So thank you, Silas. That was such a beautiful presentation, and I wanted to comment on your presentation, some ideas that came to me. But first, I just wanted to address what Mayra was asking about the food. So on Whidbey, what I've noticed is we have a lot of food banks that are springing up. We already had 1 or 2, but a lot of restaurants are offering curbside pickups, which
Okay.
seems to be working. And we have food banks. I'm not quite sure how they're distributing the food. It might be by appointment. And one of the thoughts that came to me was listening to the conversation around food and your idea of cooking the food through the restaurants is why not run online fun cooking classes for all ages with vegan recipes where you can actually prepare your own food and make a real celebration around the food, which leads me back to your beautiful story about coconuts, because I think what we discovered this morning, our first 2 hours before you came on, was that we were all connecting through poetry, story, and music. And that's one thing I think we need to bring back into the dialoguing. Yes, we need to feed people. We need to make sure people aren't in isolation. People who are sick are getting care. But we also need to connect our souls to one another. And art, poetry, music, visual arts, cooking is great tools for doing that, and very important, because what we felt this morning was we were one heart together, even though we were in our little bubbles, our cocoons. And then, sorry, I'm being long-winded, but one thing I'd love to add to your list as well of when you're talking about the transformation from religion, get religion out of politics, etc. One thing I didn't see mentioned there, which I think should be included, which is to do with separation, which is how we treat gender and how we treat age. So we have terrible ageism in this country, also lack of respect for youth and children, also being wisdom carriers, and a whole around racism and around gender. So I think those are also things that we are addressing, of course, and need to continue addressing, but I think it needs to be written out as a
Yes, absolutely, yeah. It also has to do with the kind of stories we tell. We need to change our stories so that we get that out, the ageism and the genderism out of our stories too. And that's a great idea to have. I was watching this video of musicians who were on Zoom. There were like 5 musicians who were synchronizing their instruments and they're singing on Zoom. And they sang about the coronavirus. And it was great, to watch them do that. So we are an amazing species. We should be, we are part of something much larger, much more beautiful than we give credit for.
Yeah. And everything is possible with Zoom. I'm about to launch kids art classes on Zoom, which will be very fun. I especially like the fact that I can mute them if I have to, which you can't do when you're in a classroom with them.
That's right.
So yeah, thank you.
All right, beautiful. We got Miles, followed by Jamin, followed by Sarah. And feel free to raise your hand if you want to get in the queue. Miles, now.
Hey, hi everybody. So yeah, this concept that Dr. Rao presents, that we need to recognize that this is an abundant planet. We have to move from these blinders that everything's scarce to really recognizing how much energy and how much food potential exists around us. So for example, Jane Velez Mitchell, she's always got these great news items that she broadcasts. And one of them was a gentleman who was from lettuce.com. And I have to go back and watch the rest of it, but there are these cones. One of the things they have are these cones, and you can plant lettuce and grow, right on your balcony or in your window, food, right? Very easily. A little bit of water, have the seeds, some soil. I mentioned that in my city, because of the economic downturn, there's now at least 4 complete office towers that are empty in our downtown core. And these are buildings that are 40 stories tall. And just imagine if, in the windows of these buildings, you had every floor was a greenhouse. They're already got water piped through them, and they're all glass. They're basically vertical greenhouses just waiting. And we're convinced that, oh no, we can't grow our own food, or we're lazy, or we allow the costs to be externalized. So in other words, what I'm referring to is our situation here. I'm in Canada, and we could be growing a lot of food for ourselves, but we're convinced that, we got to get this stuff from California and Mexico, and it's good to trade between nations. I'm not against trade, but there's no reason why we shouldn't be self-sufficient. The economist Richard D. Wolff, even in the best of times, he says that 30%, even when the economy is going full bore, 30% of your tools and resources are sitting idle. So for example, right now, we have schools, and I'm sure your schools are very similar, junior high and high schools, they have home economic classes. These are classrooms that are equipped with like 6 workstations and stoves and ovens and sinks, for the kids to do their home economics courses. They're sitting idle. Those could easily be converted into feeding people who need food in this time of economic stress when people are losing their incomes. And I know I'm running a little over time, but I want to finish with this, if you'll allow me. And please consider this. And what I'm proposing is we now call it the eating meat, dairy, and livestock feed virus, not the coronavirus. It is important to rename the virus so that it indicates or identifies the root cause of what ails us. It is important to speak the truth. Let's say I have a case of Corona beer, and I have another case of Black Label beer, and a few bottles of Johnny Walker, and a bottle of Crown Royal. I drink all the Corona, and then I get behind the wheel of my 1993 Ford Aerostar. Not far from home, I crash into a family in their Chevrolet Impala station wagon. I'm dating myself. But, so I crash into a family, and they're injured or killed. So are we going to say that the event was a corona? In other words, by using the noun of what I had been drinking? Or would we say it was a Crown Royal if I had consumed that bottle? No, what we would do is describe the tragic and criminal event as a drunk driving accident. It would be more powerful to rename our situation and start using something that will move us to the solution. Greatly reduce the use of coronavirus or COVID-19. The only way to solve a problem is to properly define it. 80% of the work needed to solve a problem is to define it. So, the only way to solve pandemics is to acknowledge they are primarily the result of animal abuse because of eating meat, dairy, and other animal products and the livestock feed industries. We acknowledge this by using a meaningful description of our problem. Take a moment every time you communicate verbally or in postings to do this, and suggest others do the same when they communicate with you. Thank and protect the medical people by staying at home if you can. Wash your hands and go straight home and self-quarantine if you've arrived from somewhere else. And we can stop the eating meat, dairy, and livestock feed virus. Thank you.
I think BJ calls
Thoughts?
it the carnivirus.
The what virus?
The carnivirus.
Very good. Yeah, that's what we need to start doing. They have us using descriptors that deflect us from the real source of the issue.
Right.
Beautiful. Thank you, Miles. All right, in the queue, we've got Jamin, followed by Sarah. Feel free to raise your hand if you want to be in the queue. And just kind of a quick follow-on, and this really builds on everything that's been said, but particularly modeling off of China, I believe that food distribution should be centralized. Sure, we might use a whole network of restaurants, but we urgently need safety standards for each of those restaurants and their employees so we can verify that the people preparing the food are not sick, for crying out loud. And then distribute just, like pallet-sized quantities of food to the entrance of each neighborhood, just speaking simplistically in broad brushstroke terms. And then the neighborhood itself has a committee that organizes for the, break and bulk distribution with hazmat suits if necessary. Again, we need standards, and Silas, you are an expert on standards. And so, and because the way I see it, we can take care of three objectives with one single stroke. End world hunger by delivering nutritious vegan foods to everyone. The world goes vegan in the process, and we stop the coronavirus. So 1, 2, 3, bam, bam, bam. And then we can get on with the business of the other urgent things we need to do, which are now much more urgent, like cooling the planet through SRM, since we're losing the global dimming and temperatures are projected to spike because of that. Anyway, those are my comments. Back to you, Silas, and then Sarah is next. Thank you.
Yeah, you're right. But what we were thinking about is what would we do if our government is incompetent? Because our government is incompetent. It's showing itself to be truly incompetent. So I think local governments are better. They're more attuned to the local conditions. So you have better chances. This is why during the summit starting next week, we are interviewing the vice mayor of Tempe, because I think that when we go up the hierarchy, you get more and more incompetence in the current system.
Beautiful, thank you. All righty, next is Sarah, and there's no one in the queue after Sarah. So if you'd like to speak, comment, question, now is a good time to get in the queue. Sarah, great to see you. Go for it, Sarah. Sarah Siegel, are you there? She may have had to step away. All right, so we'll keep Sarah's place.
I'm here.
Oh, go for it, Sarah. Yes, thank you.
I'm sorry, I was just trying to press the button. So I wanted to ask Dr. Rao maybe to elaborate a little bit more. I know that he already gave the presentation, but from his book, Carbon Dharma, a lot of this stuff that he was talking about today comes from the whole butterfly analogy. But it talked about there's some steps for awakening in the metamorphosis part where it talks about the humanity, there's like a summary of steps for awakening.
Right.
And I wanted to find out how we can, because everybody has their own awakening, but how can we, when you're talking about getting the food, the healthy food to people, how does that help with people's awakening? And is that going to stop the, I was trying to figure out what the process is for that, and is that going to stop the live markets from being open and all the places that still keep pushing the meat, dairy, and eggs and all the stuff that's making people sick? Like where does that, not 2 more pandemics have to hit? Because right now we have H8N2 and then we have the swine flu coming again. So I'm not sure if those are going to come over to the US. I'm not certain of that. One was in Germany recently. I'm just trying to figure out, because we talked about this last night in the meditation, the Dharmendra, is that it's going to have to get worse before it gets better. But how do we wrap our brains around this right now, where I feel like we're just in this, like, we are starting to have the awakening, right? So the awakening is starting to happen, but we already have the awakening. So we're the messengers, I guess, to deliver though. I'm not sure. I just feel kind of confused because I feel like it's, maybe elaborate on how we should start doing these actions. Because we already serve vegan food to the homeless here in LA all the time. But I'm talking about the mass population that's not even had their awakening yet. How do we get through that, I guess, is my question. I mean, you would think that this pandemic would cause some people to wake up, and it has, but I'm talking about the mass, because somebody asked President Trump the other day if he was going to close the live markets, and they actually got, at least they got the question out, and that was just getting it out there was better than nothing. But I'm just trying to figure out, how do we get it to the butterfly culture?
Yeah, butterfly culture is some ways out, hoping by 2026, okay, but some ways out. But right now, so far we have been, as a community, we have been asking people to change. We ask people to go vegan, right? So we have been sort of, it's not about, it hasn't been about making things available and giving it to them. Like, I mean, what you're doing with the homeless is great. That's exactly what should be happening, right? But what I see is people who have homes, who don't have jobs anymore, and they're wondering how are they going to eat? Because the current system is based on you having a job before you can eat anything. And now we have been put into this cocoon and said you can't get out. So in this environment, I'm saying we as vegans, and also those with money, we should educate others to start giving food away, right? So this is the idea behind this buy one, give one meal, is that those with money can then fund those who don't have the money to get some good food that would make them less sick, so that they don't become a burden on the hospital system. So it's a win-win-win for everybody, because the hospital system also does not want to see more patients coming in. Okay? So they see that the current model is broken. The current model of deliberately fixing people, deliberately making people sick and fixing them, it's reached its zenith. You cannot go any further. Now you have beds in tents outside, right? So it's breaking the current system, and therefore now they will be open to listening to reason on this, because that's what this virus is telling us to do, is to implement the truth. You cannot pretend that eating meat is not going to cause you diabetes anymore. because it is causing you diabetes, and you are going to be a sick patient when you get the virus. So it is sort of forcing us to see the reality of what we are doing. And that is awakening. Awakening is about seeing things as they are, as opposed to as you are, or as we are. Right? So it is, to me, nature's way of slapping us and waking us up.
I'd also like to add, if I may, thanks, Silas, that was beautiful. I think it was Sarah who was talking before, that
Right.
we can influence through our choices and our actions, and be role models. So we can influence to a certain extent, but there is a bigger plan, and there are these natural cycles and events. So we cannot push the butterfly to leave the cocoon too early, or it will die. And that's been proven. There's a biologist who studied butterflies, and he tried to force the butterfly out of its cocoon, and it died. So we have to go through this period, and we don't know how long that gestation period is right now.
Right.
But the importance is to not get too far ahead. It's to stay in gestation right now and do the inner work so that we're ready for when we start to crack out of the chrysalis state.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So that's about having faith, right? That's about having faith that we are part of something much bigger, and that things are going to work out. And we do our part in it. We're each doing our part in it. Yeah, there are people who are going to deny that this is caused by animals. It's caused by, there are people who are, actually someone sent me a video where a scientist was claiming it's all caused by 5G. You know, this COVID-19 is caused by 5G. And then he points to, correlation. 1918, it was caused by radio waves, because he came up with radio waves at that time. So that's why we had that pandemic then, and so on. And we have to just reason it out with them, tell them, look, it's caused by 5G. How come it has this infection model? How come it's one person who causes someone else to get infected, and you can see the infection happening, and you can actually model it in simulations and show that that's really what's happening in reality, right? So why is it that some people get cooked earlier than other people if it's 5G? Right? And so why is the cooking then infectious? So it's reasoning with people, but and then you can show them in the microscope. Here is the virus that caused it. But beyond a certain point, you don't have to argue with them. Just leave them alone, because they'll come along later. So we just have to go to the people who are willing to listen and help them wake up. Help them with good food. So I think we now have this opportunity, this golden opportunity to get people to our side, not by asking them, but by giving them things, which actually makes them healthier. And therefore they say, I want to join you.
I think it's also going back to what you said earlier, Silas, that the truth is the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually the truth always surfaces. And so, we don't have to convince anyone, we just have to wait, which is hard to do. And we talked yesterday with Dharmendra about patience, from the gift to the siddha. Patience is one of the things that we're learning in our impatience for things to change and happen and be different.
Right. But we have to always tell the truth. We have to always talk about the truth and let go of if someone listens to you or not. That's not your problem. It's their issue, right? So you have to let go of that. That's hard to do, okay? But it feels like you're saying things and for no purpose whatsoever if no one's listening to you. But We have to trust that it is being listened to. The truth always gets through.
Beautiful conversation. We have plenty more time. It's 12 after, and we have until the top of the hour. So more questions, comments, and of course, my belief is silence is also okay. It's good to just kind of take it all in. So back to you, Silas. All right, Miles, go for it.
Yeah, thank you very much. So following up with Sarah's question, so often people are not drilling deep enough with respect to problem identification, the source of what ails us, as I said earlier. And a case in point is this item that I just responded to in the last 2 minutes, the Real News Network, realnews.com. They have a pretty good posting, a news item by Sonia Shaw, who is some expert in epidemiology or something. And they show they talk about, where the virus is coming from, but they limit it to talking about wet markets, these where the exotic animals are. And there's just, in this 13-minute video, there's only one flash where they show a cow, and maybe another instance where they mention our own society insofar as our meat and agriculture, dairy industries. So I just posted, a whole bunch of stuff about your work, Dr. Rao and Dr. Neil Barnard and Dr. Gregor, saying that, they're doing a disservice if they don't shine a bright light on our own society and our meat and dairy. Now, I would have thought, hopefully the Real News Network will be, because they're not a mainstream network, but hopefully they'll start to listen to this. I did, as Suzanne and Benjamin know, if they've seen my email, there was a person that I used to be connected to on Scientist's Warning, and I did the same thing in a post of Stuart Scott's on his channel recently. I said, you're not really being 100%, and it's a disservice to humanity if you don't address the #1 ecological pandemic and climate culprit. And he responded about, some people need meat, and claiming that, with some of his health challenges, he feels he needs meat. But, nevertheless, I responded back to that. And I said, well, even if people need meat, and, I'm not going to impose upon somebody what their health needs, but in no event should this abuse of animals be tolerated. This overcrowding, and whether it's the pork, the pigs, the cows, or chickens, these are the sources. This abuse is the source of our problem. So in summary, I'm just saying, we even have to go hard on the people we think should be enlightened, and the environmentalists and the climate concerned people, and really put it at them that, they're missing the root cause. Thank you.
Right, yeah, right. I mean, even if you say you need meat, the truth is the truth. If this is the leading cause of climate change, you should say it. And you can say, well, it's the leading cause, but I need meat. That's okay. But say it, say the truth. So it's a responsibility that they have, that they are shirking at the moment. Scientists Warning is shirking it. Real News Network is shirking it. All the mainstream media is shirking it, because they are all telling the story from the perspective of the caterpillar. And that's their job, is to maintain the caterpillar. They are part of the caterpillar. So it's all about lies. Okay? It's about maintaining the caterpillar. So when they see a wild animal market causing a problem like that, it's an opportunity for the animal agriculture industry to grow. That you can replace these wild animals with domesticated animals. Okay? So that's the way the caterpillar sees it. right? So it's at some point we have to say, the caterpillar will realize that it can no longer go back to being a caterpillar. It is in the chrysalis. It's stuck. You cannot go back, to being a caterpillar again. They haven't realized yet, but it's going to happen soon. Because can you imagine going back to flying the way we were flying? No, it's just not possible, because even if China has contained it to maybe 80,000 infections. They have 1.5 billion people, okay? And they don't want another infection to show up. So they're going to be very careful as to who comes in now, right? So every country is going to be so it just shrinks your economy right away when you do that, which means the caterpillar can no longer grow like it used to. And anytime another infection comes, they're going to be going back into the same lockdown mode. So until all of us get infected, this is the new normal. Until we all get infected and get herd immunity, this is the new normal. So
I'll also just add, that where the virus is being successfully controlled, well, they've stomped down the curve. China now apparently is in a steady state, an equilibrium, where they have the capacity to deal with the number of new cases. And apparently the new cases that are showing up there, they know they're coming from people that have traveled in. Singapore has apparently done a tremendous job in capping this, and South Korea. Now, what's going to happen is that they're open for business, and they're going to be kicking our economic butts going forward, because you need ventilators, you need masks, you need food. Well, we're open for business. We'll ship it to you, because our failures to recognize this national security threat is really, if we're concerned about national security, it's an abomination what we've allowed to happen in our countries. Tremendous advantage now in their court, and well, thank God, at least somebody's got a handle on it, because we're going to need the masks, we're going to need the gowns, and we're going to need the ventilators and food and everything. And so at least, thankfully, somebody's got this under control.
Yeah, but it is a global society now. You see doctors from China coming to Italy to help out. It's the national boundaries don't really mean so much, because the virus doesn't respect national boundaries, right? This is why the virus comes in through. So if we do, unrestricted trade from China, China is going to get the virus again. So which is why they are going to be very circumspect as to what comes in and out. And that is an impediment to growth, the way we had been doing, unrestrained growth. It's no longer possible. And I think it's also bringing us across national boundaries, bringing us together to see our commonality, that we are one humanity. If Africans are getting infected, they're going to bring it to us eventually. So you have to make sure that they don't get infected. So it's, if Africans are hungry, they're going to migrate. So you know that. And if they migrate, they're going to bring it with them. So you have to take care of everybody, right? So I think this virus is teaching us to take care of each other first.
It's such a blessing in disguise, the virus.
Yeah.
And it also seems like we're starting to be, even though we're exactly what you're saying, Silas, we're connecting as one family around the globe, but we're also recentering in our local places. So food can be grown locally, governance local. You much more like, I guess, in earlier centuries where people walked everywhere and you only could go as far as you could walk, really. Or if you had a horse, I guess you were lucky. So I think that's also really interesting, that we're becoming more global, but also more local.
Right. It's a fascinating transformation. Just watching it. But I see now two of my nephews are doctors. They're on the front lines. A lot of healthcare workers are getting infected, and because they don't have the right equipment, so we have to get them the right equipment. So, I mean, there is a lot of work to be done that we can participate in. It's a different economy that we have to build now in the chrysalis phase. More about essential things, essential things that we are working on as opposed to non-essential things. I don't expect, theaters to be opened anytime soon. I don't expect sports stadiums to be open anytime soon. It's, all those places where you get lots of people congregating together, it's going to be difficult to open that anytime soon. In fact, I was giving a lecture to students at ASU on Zoom. And I realized that in the gallery view, I'm actually able to observe everyone's faces very quickly compared to if I was in the classroom with them. Right? So to me, it's a better way of gathering collective intelligence because I'm getting feedback from people right away. Yeah, Javen's right.
And in terms of being in this chrysalis state, I'm not sure I'm saying that right, and reconfiguring, the first thing we're reconfiguring is our thoughts. And we're learning to think collectively, which is exactly what we're doing right here. And as I was commenting right at the beginning, when we were still on break, we had dreamed of humanity getting to this place where we're all talking on video conference, because then, oh my goodness, the best ideas will bubble to the top and people can congregate around those and meet each other and all that. And going back, even months ago, we were just like, what's it going to take? What's it going to take to get people to come together and get connected through a network of video conference conversations? We have our answer.
A little virus, huh?
Exactly. And but it accomplished not only that, not only did it get us all connected, it got us all freaking out about the world's problems. Whereas even up to a few months ago, you could still be a denier and get by and just go on with the inertia of the economy and whatnot and life and everything, politics, food, everything. Oh yeah, no, it seems to be working now. Oh, it's totally clear. Everything's broken. So everyone's hyper-connected. Everyone knows it's an emergency. We're all coming together. So from the standpoint of collective superintelligence, it's actually hard to imagine a better situation. And my heart goes out to everyone who's suffering. I don't wish suffering on anyone or anything, but it's just to observe, it's like asset-based thinking. Suddenly this giant asset has fallen into our lap, along with a giant set of problems. But if we use this asset, this collective superintelligence, and this new culture of coming together and working together, I think the asset can far outweigh all the harm. I
think we also have to capitalize every opportunity now that we have people's attention and they're using the word corona or COVID-19 and saying, we're going to say the meat and dairy virus. We've got to get that burned into people's minds, and they're going to go, what do you mean meat and dairy virus? But now's our opportunity that we shouldn't let slip to correct. Every time you hear somebody say corona, go, well, yeah, the meat and dairy virus. And then they're going to say, what do you mean?
Yeah. No, it's always important for us to tell the truth. So long as, even if one person believes a lie, you have to tell them the truth, to keep telling the truth. Sarah asks, do we ask Jeff Bezos to send healthy food to the masses? I'm sure Whole Foods has a lot of good kitchens that they could use. If he wants to, he can do it.
All right, Sarah, you've got your hand raised. Mm-hmm.
Hi, Dr. Rao.
Yeah.
This is incredible, by the way. I'm really enjoying this. My next kind of question, or wanted to try to get more elaboration on, I know you can't predict the future. I'm not asking you to, but I'm kind of asking you to. We already know that this is the system that has to completely break down. Do you think that we should go ahead and let it break down all the way now before we go back to, unfortunately, the normalized violence? Or do you think that, I'm not really sure. I'm kind of like, I'm sure everybody's thinking the same thing, but I feel like in the vegan model, we should let everything just break down all the way, because we're working with a system and we don't want to work with a system, because we all know what systems do. We want, I guess, work with processes per se. I'm just trying to figure out the timeline of where we think we're going next with, after we distribute the vegan food and all that stuff. But how do we get the government to break down to the point where we don't even have to have an election in November? Feels like we should let everything just go down back to zero almost, even though it's, our timeline's not until vegan 2026, till 2026, give or take a year. I almost feel like it's happening sooner than we predicted, because it just seems to be, people I don't think are realizing the signs that are happening. I don't really think, because we have so many sleepers and there's so many people stuck in the matrix. So I'm trying to figure out how we not just wake up the sleepers, because you have to let them come to their own awakening. I understand that, and they will. But can we keep on with this tearing down of our government, tearing down financial systems, breaking down all these walls? And how do we do that? Like, what's the next step, I guess we could say?
Yeah, I am, I can only speak for myself, and I'm saying that I look at a situation like this and I say, where can I put my effort into making the most impact at healing the current situation? And I see, this getting an app that would help people with the food, helping people get good food that reduces their diabetes, heart disease. That seems to me to be a good place to put my efforts into at the moment, based on where we are. And in the process, I think you build trust with people. You build a new currency system, so to speak, because people are beginning to see the old thing is now collapsing, right? They thought they had lots of money, but it's collapsing. And even cash itself has become a source of infections. So there's a lot of questioning going on as to the current system, but that's independent of what we are trying to do. So we can create our own sort of currency in the form of trust. And then eventually that becomes the new currency system. So I'm seeing Aquarius as being piggybacked onto this. Previously we were trying to do Aquarius through reforestation apps, an app that would help with reforestation and so on. But there is no mind share for that anymore. Mind share is not for this. And in the process, of course, you're going to do food forests. Okay, we have to grow food forests to supply these restaurants for the vegan food. So it will come through the back door. But I see this as a way for us to advance our agenda. But the timeline is its own timeline. We don't know what the timeline is. Okay, so we are just going to keep at it, keep doing the right thing, keep telling the truth, and keep helping people. And in the process, I think we will find our way out. in the right way. Just like Melissa said, that you cannot help a butterfly come out before the butterfly is ready. Then, she still has fluid in her body and she cannot fly and so on. Right?
I'd like to add also, was that Sarah who was talking
Mhm.
just now? Yeah, Sarah.
Right.
I don't know if you heard that story of my recent experience with the young boy who shot and killed the raccoon 6 months ago. And I went up and challenged his parents, and they got really mad at me.
Yeah, you talked about it last night.
Yeah, and I just want to retell that quickly, that
Yeah,
story,
it's a great
because
story.
I think, that's where we can act locally, is through our conversations that are done in a loving way. And it took that young man 6 months for his consciousness, which probably was working on him heavy duty, to have the courage to come up and then have that conversation with me and Jamin, and ask us for our perspective. And he owned that he was brought up in a family of hunters. And when he said that, he was taught to have respect for the animal and they use all the parts. And then I asked him, well, did you eat the raccoon that you killed? And he said no. So he was confronted with the truth, and now he gets to go away and think about it. So I think there's a certain amount of humility as well. Like I used to want to save the whole world and change everybody, which I think is kind of a little bit arrogant also. So now I really just, I do what I can in a loving way. And people awaken when it's their time. I don't think any of us can force that. And we each one of us have our gifts and our particular ways of working. So just keep doing what you're doing, and I guess practice patience and yeah.
Yeah. And what helps me most is that having faith in the process, trust the process of nature. Nature has dealt with problems like this for billions of years, right? And always found a way. Always found a way. And there's something really beautiful that has happened with us as a species as well. And we are in the process of now transforming, and you can see that. And it's how amazing is it that we are born this time in nature, that we can witness it and be part of it.
All you have to do is look at Jackie Solomon and you just feel the love. That is so healing. Thank you, Jackie.
Always, Jackie. It's always that way.
Thank you. It's just because with so much going on and you hear so much stories, and it is to feel this, to know this, and to hold this space, it's like I feel it's our moral obligation to do, because so many of us cannot see. So those of us that can have that obligation to maintain this frequency and to continue to work on ourselves, to keep that alive and keep this story that's now birthing itself in our consciousness, in our awareness. We have to keep that going.
Right. Yeah, in France, I hear that every day at 8 o'clock, people get out of their houses and clap. At one given time, everyone gets out of their house and they clap in appreciation of all the healthcare workers on the front lines of this. So something like that, if we start doing, I think it would really bring community together. Something like the Italians are singing out of their balconies, right? Playing music. And that is also, to me, spirituality. Spirituality is about connectedness. seeing the connection between each of us, seeing the connection between us and nature, and seeing that we are part of a larger intelligence, that we are just pieces of a larger intelligence. So, I mean, people say that, that humans are the virus for the planet, like the virus species for the planet. So we can also be a good virus, right?
All righty. Sarah, go ahead.
Okay, so to follow up on that, what's the guideline that we should maybe follow that you recommend for now, for the next, I would say maybe like 6 months? Like, do we have some type of a, like what we're doing now? Do we have some type of a timeline or goal where we do this stuff and then we check it off, or like, stay accountable, like what we're doing? I'm not sure. I'm just trying to figure stuff out. Because now we have time on our hands.
Yeah. Me too, Sarah. We're all in the same boat. So so I'm hosting a series of interviews starting on Monday. So every day at 1 o'clock in the afternoon Pacific time. So I'm talking to different leaders about different aspects of this transformation that's happening, so that we can all, begin to see things from a larger perspective. And then that will help us make the right decisions as we go along. That's, I guess, collective intelligence. That's how it happens. So we're going to have one interview per day for 18 days. And then on April 18th, we are going to all come together and do a panel discussion. So this is like a coming together of the collective intelligence, right? So that we can look at things from others' perspectives. And then on the 25th, we have a more detailed conference happening on health. And then we are planning one for farming for the planet a week after that, and so on. So it's going to be a series of conferences after that. I think it's a good time for us to educate ourselves because we are all at home. And then we can figure out how we go out and participate in this. I mean, I'm sure we're all doing that too in the process.
Okay, can I just say one more thing?
Mm-hmm.
So I just found out that Billie Eilish, who is famous singer, as you probably know, she's vegan.
Mm-hmm.
She and her mom are teaming up with Los Angeles vegan restaurants, and they're going to be feeding hospital workers.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to be getting food. They're going to be actually, Maggie Baird is a longtime vegan. She's going to purchase food from participating vegan restaurants in Los Angeles, and they're going to be delivering them to communities like hospitals, senior centers, homeless people,
Right.
women's shelters, things like that. So I feel like what you just said about we're delivering food, this is the start of it.
Right.
And the people that have the resources, as in current system that we're using now, money,
Mm-hmm.
instead of Aquarius. I'm ready to go to Aquarius, actually, personally. That's a start of this. So I feel like that's great that things are happening like this. I guess I'm just being impatient, like Melissa said. I need to be more patient because I just feel like everybody else, let's get back to normal or what is normal, but just not being patient is something I need to practice, of course. But I just feel so, torn about what to do, I guess. I mean, I know what to do. How long do we go for this? Do we just reinvent ourselves, I guess, into a different, since we're caterpillars and we got to move to the next thing. We're not ready to be butterflies yet, not everybody, but how do we move to the metamorphoses that we, of course, want to create at that
Right.
point? We don't really know. I don't really think anybody knows or can predict what's going to happen. We just know it's going to be a vegan world where not everybody is vegan, of course, but
Right.
we live in a vegan world, which is normalized compassion. So I'm just trying to figure out, do we really have to wait 6 years? That kind of thing. Or do we wait 6 months and then all of a sudden we see this big shift? You know, I know you can't predict the future, but I mean, I feel like you can predict it better than anybody else.
It's going to take time. I don't know if 6 years or 6 months. I doubt it is 6 months. I'm thinking that it will be on the order of 6 years. I don't know. And Kimaya has told me that if I do it in 7 years, she'll still be okay with me. So, it is. We are all guessing at this point, but we need everyone. We need everyone to pull along. And some of us will be more impatient. Some of us will be less patient. Less impatient. It's okay. We are all part of this larger intelligence. Okay, that's the one thing that we need to believe in. That we need to have faith in. That we are part of something much larger than we think. And that intelligence is displaying. It's showing. Look, you were looking for a reduction in the economic activity. Here you go. You got it, right? So you couldn't have imagined a scenario like this, like 3 months ago, that would do this. But here it is. Some people were saying that that pandemic could arise from things like this, but no one really paid attention to them, right? Because there are all kinds of other ways in which our society could be disrupted. It could be nuclear war. It could be, huge climate catastrophe. All those things would have had a lot more suffering, I think, than what nature has brought to us now. So we have to just acknowledge the gifts we have and use the gifts we have and deploy it for the good of the whole as best as we can.
Yeah, I would love to add also for Sarah that just from hearing your words, it sounds like you're still focusing, and this is not a criticism because we've all been there and are there. I'm focusing on the outward, like what can I do? But the way I see it, and I'm not saying I'm right, but this is just from my perspective, it is being done to us, like the creator, God, the spirit, nature. It's doing to us. It's not the other way around. And so that's where the patience has to come, where it's almost like you have to meditate into the moment. And I just would like to give an analogy of dance. So if we see ourselves as going to a dance, like we're in the dance of the coronavirus time, you want to enjoy the music and really all the steps, while you're in the dance. You don't want to already have finished the dance because you will have missed the opportunity to do all the steps and hear all the music. And so I think in a way we're all being asked to be in the dance of life and just be with that. And with that will come many things that we can't even imagine. And I could imagine that the world that's going to be created birthed out of this moment and out of each one of us is going to be way more beautiful and way more compassionate than we could even imagine from where we're standing right here, right now. And the other thing I just wanted to address is time. That time is a human construct and there is no time really. It's just a continuum of cycles and events. And so I think it helps us to get out of this idea of time because something could change in a moment. We don't know. Maybe tomorrow the whole world will be vegan, maybe in 30 seconds, maybe not in our lifetime. We don't know. There's so much mystery around this and it's a process.
Beautiful. And this maps to a siddha that I'll read in a second. But first, I want to welcome Michael Gosney and Miles also.
Timelessness.
Miles has his hand up. But the siddha. So Mark read Gene Key number 5. Shadow, impatience. The gift, patience. The Siddha,
Timelessness.
timelessness. Timelessness. Beautiful stuff.
Love it.
All righty.
Hey, on that note, can I jump in real quick?
Yep. Good. Please, Dharmender, please.
Yeah, it's like, I think some people who are really intelligent, and there's a lot of them in this meeting, a lot of times we see down the road and we kind of get a hit about something and we think, oh, that's where I want to be. I want to see all animals stop suffering now. And I'm going to get really impatient and not have a whole lot of tolerance for anybody who's not really supporting that. And at the same time, my heart's wide open and I'm feeling this immense suffering of all these beings out there, which we've all felt as vegans. It really, really unbearably hurts sometimes. But I think the thing to remember is that your meditation has to balance that out. It's great to be open like that, but if you're not, if the compassion you have doesn't balance it and can't hold that and handle it, then you're opening too much too quick. And it's not just because you can see it, you're supposed to be there. You have to grow into that level of understanding and that level of love and that level of awareness. You can't just jump into it just because you see it. And I've seen so many people on where I come from in my life, the path of meditation, of awakening, all those things, the spiritual disciplines, doing that and then getting very bitter and shut down inside and then just learning a lot of fancy lingo and really just kind of taking their frustrations out on other people by misleading them in directions that really, using the words just to get things out of people rather than really to give something. Because it's all about giving. It's all about, we're here for giving. The true essence of forgiveness is forgiving. We're here to forgive. We're made for giving. We were given life in the first place. We seem to forget that. And so our whole life should be about giving. But somehow we've gotten a very, just through the conditioning and the powers that be and the structures that are set up, our mindset has been completely upside down from the way the universe works. The way the universe works is by giving, not by taking. And so it's just good to remember, okay, you can feel all that suffering of all the beings in the world and stuff. But if you're starting to feel in yourself some strange things because of it, you need maybe just close down a little until your meditation can hold that space, and then you can open. You'll be more effective that way too, because if a lot of what you're doing is dealing with the side effects of feeling too much and not really bearing it, and the way is because you don't feel good. It's got to be a balance. Then back off of that a little, and then come back into yourself. And what can I do? That's always a great thing. What can I do right now? That gets you grounded. That gets you moving again. So just a little bit of sharing on that note, because I was kind of picking that up in there.
Beautiful. Thank you, Dharmender. All righty. Miles, go for it.
Yeah, one of the things that's a challenge is that to be a friend, you have to speak the truth. And I know we want to try to slide the truth in gently at times, but there's also times where you just have to speak the truth. It just came up that the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom has tested positive, and I think the Health Minister as well. So this virus, it shows no favorites for anybody.
Right.
Now, speaking truth, as far as siddhas and such, be interested to have response. One of the truths that's crossed my paths, and I've mentioned it before, but it's actually officially released now, and that is the World Trade Center Building 7 controlled demolition. You notice I didn't refer to it as 9/11. It's the World Trade Center Building 7 controlled demolition. Professor Halsey, University of Alaska at Fairbanks, and a team of expert structural engineers have determined that it was Building 7, a controlled demolition. So, there's been trillions of dollars and millions of people killed. And there was a failure to properly analyze the problem. And so-called war on terror is really a war on innocence. Has got to be considered, because It's pretty much irrefutable. So what does that have to do with coronavirus? Well, if we think of the trillions of dollars and the lives lost in going after very likely the wrong enemy, there's going to be a lot of consequences today for all that wasted money. And that's a truth, it's a hard truth, but it needs to be brought into the table as far as I'm concerned. There's an excellent video just put out by the Lawyers Committee for 9/11 Truth that explains the report from the University of Alaska. But like the fact that it's the meat and dairy virus, this doesn't get any mainstream media coverage. So we're in very perilous times.
Yeah, in general, the caterpillar was an inverted time in which there was a lot of lies being framed as the truth. And we were living literally in a matrix, yeah. So it's about dismantling, it's about seeing through that. When you see through that, then you step out of it, and then you don't worry about that. It's about building the new. What can we do now?
Yes, Michael. Mm-hmm.
Hi, everyone. Well, I could just offer a few comments. Unfortunately, I have to jump off pretty quickly. I have a call coming up, but I'll maybe come back on later. But certainly what the pandemic is forcing us to do, and obviously many people have been observing this, is to realize, the undeniable truth, Miles, of our interdependence. And it's forcing us, and I like to kind of put the meme out, we need to think like a species, it's forcing us to think like a species. And what's been missing in my view, and it's a little bit, thinking in terms of how we leverage the collective intelligence, methodologies that Radish and others are, and really everybody's coming to the realization that yes, we need our collective intelligence, but where we go with that, it's creating a vision, a coherent vision of where we want to go as a species, what the right evolutionary path is for us. And we are equipped to compose that vision. And the power, in my view, is in intention, in collective mass intention, and what we project out there. And I believe that the Gaia mind, the planet itself, will help us realize our ambitions, but we just need to have a coherent vision. It's like, the mother wants to give her children what they want, but if the children don't know what they want, the mother can't help them achieve it, So anyway, that's collective intention and coherence in our species trajectory is what I feel we have a better chance of achieving now, coming out of this crisis. That's my hope, at least. So just wanted to weigh in with those thoughts.
I really like where you're coming from with that, Michael. It seems to me that a meeting like this, and maybe similar ones around the world, and maybe ones that other people are doing even in this meeting and other meetings, is kind of the spearhead of making that a reality, and starting the word spearhead, because intention is single-pointed focus of attention on one objective without wavering with your thoughts, words, and deeds over a sustained period of time. That's how you pull an intention through. And to be able to start to coordinate that with all of us as we become more and more intimate and familiar with each other and all our capabilities is really, I think, a colossal act of what it means and what it's starting to imply, the gravity of a collective intelligence and a body of intelligence that can start to move as one kind of, even though each facet, each one of us has a unique intelligence to contribute, the collective is still like moving as a unified force field of intent. And so I really harmonize with what you're saying. And I think we have the cutting edge of that, or at least one of the cutting edges of it. There may be others, I suspect there are, but I really like the way we're doing it through a lot of the vegan energy and everything and the peacefulness and walking the path of peace, because that's really the way we got to get out of this old way of war and, you know, and everything that we've created up to now.
Well, beautiful. What a wonderful 2-hour segment. Just such an anchor for the Collective Intelligence Block Party. And in a couple minutes, we've got our next speaker joining us from England, a guest of Brett Warshawski. Brett, you want to wave just so everyone knows who you are? There you go. All right. So Brett has invited Mike Upstone to talk about Pleasant Quantum Rise, PQR. And Brett, if you want to give a little brief intro to that. Well, actually, let me first give the last words to Silas. I'm sorry, I'm getting a little ahead of myself.
No, it's perfectly fine. Thank you for the opportunity, and it's always a pleasure to be here with you. Thank you.
Wonderful, Silas, and we'll look forward to seeing Silas next week at the Block Party. Now, he's of course got a bunch of stuff coming up this coming week. And Silas, if you want to point people to where to look to find your upcoming meetings.
Yeah, so coronahealers.org has the information on the new summit. And so we are still working on the website, but there's a registration link there. So it at least collects email addresses at the moment. And we will have more information there as it gets firmed up.
Beautiful.
Okay.
Corona Healers
starting on Monday.
Beautiful. Yeah.
And what time?
And what time?
1 o'clock, 1 p.m. Pacific time, always. So next week I'm going to be at the Collective Intelligence Block Party, and at 1 o'clock I have to go to the other one right away.
Very good, very good. All righty. So Silas will be here next week at the same time, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Pacific time. And all righty. And it's just about 1 o'clock now. So how are people feeling? Should we take a few minute break? Or should we just roll right on? Brett, what do you think?
I don't think Mike's here yet, so it's good. Let's do the break. He has a baby daughter he told me he was taking care of, and I said, if you're a few minutes late, I'll just introduce it, or there's enough time for him to do the stuff that he needs to do within an hour. So he said he didn't plan on being late, but he had the baby. So let's see if he shows up. So let's call it a 5-minute rest period, break, whatever story anyone wants to share, silence, whatever.
Yeah, totally. That sounds perfect.
That's good.
All right. So we'll resume officially at 5 minutes after. Everyone is welcome to stay, and please invite all your friends and relatives to the Collective Intelligence Block Party. And feel free to chatter it up in the meantime. We're going to be taking a little break here, but feel free to talk away. And we'll be back at 5 minutes after. Thank you again, Silas, and thank you everyone for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks, Silas. Yep. And I'll if Mike pops on, Jamin, I'll bring him in. Don't worry about it.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Miles, you're one of my favorite all-time people. I mean, I heard you on that one call where you were outside, at the event and all that. I just thought you were, I don't know. Everyone's my favorite people, but I don't mean to do that. But I don't know. When you were out there talking to the people in the street on the call, it was just really endearing, on some level. And I enjoyed your attitude, my friend. So it's nice to see you again. And there's Michael Gosney. Hi, we had a conversation once. Good to see you.
Nice to see you here, and good to be here with everybody. And I regret that I have to sign off and jump on yet another Zoom, but
Right
I'm hoping I can beam back in a little bit later.
Okay, cool.
We will be going strong for another 17 hours.
Oh, good. All right.
Come and go as you please, everyone.
All right. Bye for now.
Hey there, Mike. So, Mike, we're just taking a couple more minutes. They just came out of a 2-hour session. So, in literally just 3 or 4 minutes, I'll introduce you, and then you can go ahead and get started.
Mike, nice to meet you all.
Yeah, there's some really awesome people here who are, as Jamin said, you will have the stage. We're here to celebrate you. And I'll pass on the Jamin spirit, which is I'll have my lighter out for your rock start, for your presentation.
Right. So, thanks.
So at the moment, we're just saying hello or silence or whatever, tuning in.
Hello, Brett.
Can you share the Eventbrite link again for me?
Yeah,
I lost it in the thing, and I opened it and then I lost it.
sure. Yeah, I'll send it now.
Is that the best way to just jump in? I prefer to learn by doing. I mean, I'm happy to read documents or watch videos, but I would rather just learn by doing. What's the best way to like get the experience of what you're doing?
The best way would be to read this one-page text, Blueprints for Intelligent Democracy. The next step would be to watch the presentation video that I've made. It's 20 minutes, but it's really informative.
Okay.
19 minutes. And then the next step is just to start participating. I mean, like, actually just building your political philosophy out of different ideas.
All right,
and
cool.
discussing it with others.
I'll do that. Can you put the one page and the video back in there just again so everyone could see it and for me?
I don't think I can send PDFs through here, and I wanted to send you that PDF as well. Can you send me your email address?
All right, yeah. Put your Facebook back in again, or send me that in the private. I missed that too. I was just in flux. So I'll just message you on Facebook, and then you can send me everything.
Okay, and I'll share this again here, since that's what we're trying to do, is to share public discussions. So here it is. That's our public discussion. And I'll also share my Facebook. Right, the two links kind of got mashed together almost.
Okay, cool. Thank you, man. Appreciate it. All right. Jamie, can you hear me from where you're at?
Yeah, we can hear you, Brett.
Okay, I'll just go ahead, and as long as I just want the Jamie to hear it, so as long as he can hear it, I'll start.
He's up at the front of the house, so he can't hear you quite yet.
Okay, I'll wait a second actually, because actually it's a video presentation, so I'll wait. Yeah, I'll wait for that.
Okay.
Just another minute or two, Mike. Sorry.
Thank you.
So they're going for 24 hours, Mike, and they've been on since 6 a.m. Pacific. Jamin and Melissa and Nolan, and who else has? Other people have been here for quite a long time. I think Eddie was there earlier. Jackie's been on for a while. There's some regulars that are kind of like Dharmendra that are really come for quite a long time, and Nolan and Melissa and Jamin basically hold down the space for literally 24 hours. These crazy cats. All right, so I'm gonna get started. Is that cool, Jamin? Okay. So hey everybody, this is my friend Mike Upstone, who is co-leading, I'm just using those words loosely, a project called Pleasant Quantum Rise with a friend of ours named Andreas. I'm contributing to the project. There's a bigger group of people that are contributing in different ways. I loosely say Mike and Andreas are sort of the source points that are really putting the most energy and love and consistent effort in as their dream and part of the mission here. Mike is in Austria at the moment. I think he's originally from the UK. He'll share a little bit, but just as a background, he's in Vienna at the moment. And what he's going to do is he's going to share, I think it's a walkthrough presentation. It's probably 10 to 15 minutes, tops, 20 minutes maybe tops, something around that, which he'll just narrate through and show some images and things. Yep. And we're going to hold off questions till afterwards. He'll also share after his presentation maybe a little bit more about himself and like where it's at, where it's going kind of scenario. And then we can open up the space to any conversation and questions and things like that. So I think he just said he'd prefer to just kind of get through it first before taking questions, which I can appreciate. So Mike's a good friend of mine for several years, totally in the same space as all of us: regeneration, sustainability, new innovations, technologies, holistic living and being. How do we go into the new paradigm, et cetera, et cetera. I don't think I need to say anything more than he's a really good, friendly, awesome person who I can count on and trust, and one of the tribe here, like everyone else. And I'll just let him do the basic introduction of what Pleasant Quantum Rise is about and just get right into it. I don't think there's need to talk too much about it. We'll just get into it, be self-evident. So Mike, you really, as Jamin said, the stage is yours. You can tell us what you'd like us to do or when you want us to talk. It's actually your space just to share. And it's going live, Mike, by the way, on Facebook and YouTube, and it's recorded. So there's other people watching, and it'll be available later, on YouTube for you to share in other spaces or whatever you like.
Ah, fantastic. Wild. Well, hats off to all of you for your marathon endeavor. And thank you very much for inviting me to be here with you. Thanks for the intro, Brett. I'm just going to try and give you a quick sort of format, which is I'll go straight into the PQR 8 Reasons presentation, which is very brief. It'll be about 10 or 12 minutes, something like that. So you'll all be fully in the picture from the get-go. And from there, it's up to you. I can go into an intro or some of my background, how we got here, if that's of interest to anyone. And then I can also go into next steps, which would probably be the, where are we now, SITREP as well. And then just open up for general questions. So I'm going to share screen and show you the presentation first of all. So, welcome to Pleasant Quantum Rise. Here are 8 powerful reasons for PQR. The first thing is it starts off with a single house, which is our smallest possible iteration of what we're producing, but we're aiming to integrate technologies, cut off financial outflows at the pass, lasso them and turn them around and bring them all back into the house model in the form of multiple income streams. We've got even more for a community, more income streams, and the aim is to make these reliable, predictable, and that forms the basis of the PQR economy. And that's going to be used to bring in PQR funding on a project by project basis, because it's all based on PQR flows of values and PQR benefits for all of the parties. And then we'll be going into the PQR consciousness tools. And finally, how we can weave all this lot together to create a self-scaling network. So let's start off with the single house model. The first thing is it's going to be coated in a natural building material. In fact, these natural building materials have been used for thousands of years on the planet, and they're very ubiquitous as well. What does it mean in practical terms? In practical terms, it means that we are going to be building houses that are breathable. So it's perfect material for use with straw and wood, straw bale building, for example. It's also crystalline, and it has certain properties associated with it. I'm not sure if any of you have heard about this, but if you put a car battery on your concrete garage floor, it can be drained of electrons overnight. And that's a property of the material. But with this material, actually, it doesn't have that effect. So we can create a positively energized environment for people and animals and plants. So in practical terms, what does it mean? It means that we can have houses that are earthquake proof. And the material's been well proven in San Francisco to good effect for over 100 years. Not that everyone knows about it. Also hurricane proof, tornado proof. Perhaps more interestingly nowadays, EMF proof, 5G proof, EMP proof, and even radiation proof. And that was proved by Argonne National Laboratories in the US. So a great material for coating buildings with. The next one is energy. It's going to have its own energy, but not just have its own energy. This is building on that principle that I explained before, which is it's going to have surpluses. So we're going to have energy to export, either privately to neighbors or back to the grid, depends where you live. It's also going to incorporate some of the world's most advanced heating technologies, a grouping of these technologies, but they're all for home use. I've actually used some of these technologies from the Russian space medicine program, which were developed in the 1980s, first of all. They were so successful, they kept them secret until after the year 2000. And in fact, I'm the European trainer now because I've been using this technology for 15 years or so, treating people who are sometimes written off by the modern allopathic medical establishment and having people cured in that position. And the beauty is, especially if you're in America and you've got those outrageous healthcare costs, that a lot of things can be cured with this technology. It's very well proven, it's very safe and very simple. So what else will we be bringing in? Indoor grown fresh food all the year round. Again, using that protective environment and using principles of aquaponics, which means that it's going to be something that is absolutely reliable as a closed loop system. And not a lot of people know that actually aquaponics is more environmentally friendly and more productive than hydroponics. But it doesn't mean you need to eat your fish. If you're a vegetarian, you can have pet fish as well. And there are some fish that actually like to be petted, strangely enough. But these foods, the intention is that we're not just going to be growing cabbages and turnips indoors. We're going to be growing at least 40, and at the last count, it was about 44 different varieties of food indoors all year round. Not just that, we'll be bringing in a plethora of food growing technologies, which means that we should be ending up with food, the quality of which probably the Queen of England or the President of the United States does not have access to. And a lot of these technologies are reasonably to well proven, but what no one has ever done so far is integrate them all together. And the likely results that we expect include things like hyper-mineralized crops. What does that mean in practical terms? If you spray organic grapes with an ultrafine natural rock mineral powder, then those grapevines can be highly resistant to drought and to frosts. But perhaps more importantly, when you pick your grapes, they can be in perfect eating condition 30 days after they're picked. And these are the results of some independent tests. So wildly good in terms of the variety, the freshness, and the quality. And I think absolutely everyone deserves this, and that's a key part of this model. It's for everyone. The next one is not just pure, but structured and energized water. And the implication of that is that no matter how good or bad your municipal water supply is, or even the water from your local well and groundwater, we're aiming to put water back into the environment that's actually of a better quality than came into the house in the first place. And as a natural result of using all of these things together, we'll be absolutely minimizing waste, packaging, etc. In the UK, your average family drives about 900 miles to and from the local shops to get their food each year. And food is a big part of this model. So let's now look at the community income streams. The first thing is, well, we might be looking at a small group of houses, but it probably makes sense at that stage to grow the food indoors in a more appropriate large-scale building like a food-growing barn. We can zone that barn, so that means that even if you're living somewhere cold in the winter and hot in the summer, like I am in Austria, then you can have zones, so you could be growing pomegranates, mangoes, bananas, citrus fruits, avocados. And most of us, including myself, have rarely, if ever, had something like a fresh avocado in our lives. And food freshness is really important because strawberries lose the vast majority of their enzyme content no less than 4 hours after picking. So we can have a lot of flexibility in this growing as well. And if we're going to be growing that food and that variety of food and that freshness, then why sell it wholesale? We might as well be selling it directly from the community in our own eco shop and adding the maximum added value for that. And if we're going to do that and people are going to visit, then why not offer them even more added value in terms of an eco cafe and restaurant? And as you see, all of this depends on technology. And if people are living and working with the technology and becoming very familiar with it on a day-to-day basis, then it makes obvious sense to demonstrate the technologies and to sell them all locally as well. And there's a major advantage for the technology providers in terms of they get a decentralized international sales and marketing network for their product as well. And if you're going to do all that, then you might as well do seminars and education and training and consulting also, because you know, knowing how to use the coating, the natural geopolymer cement, for example, is something that you're not necessarily going to read on the packet. And if you're going to do all of that, then there's a whole load of very, very interesting reasons to visit a place like this. And why not offer B&B on a house by house or a community basis as well? And then we're generating an economy. So, and that's an economy because each house and each community is built to create surplus revenues and income streams, multiple income streams. So effectively, it's like a little business with its costs cut off and opening its arms wide to abundance. And it's heavily reliant on technology and bringing in multiple technologies together. And of course, if you've got people plus technology producing products and services, then that's my definition of economy. And it's going to produce multiple income streams coming in from outside. And those people are likely to be paying in dollars, pounds, euros, etc. So there's your fiat income stream. And if you've got all of that, then why not use some of that money to convert and to buy into what will effectively then be a resource-backed cryptocurrency? So let's look at how this could work for funders now. So if everything is a business based on proven, public, free data, everything is going to be proven, everything is going to be free, everything is going to be for you to pick it up and do exactly what you want with it. So you can modify the system and the model how you want. Then that makes a sensible basis for tokenized ownership. So what does tokenized ownership mean? It means that people could put their money into the project saying, hey, I like the proven data. I like the way that you're going to be using this for your house or for your community or whatever. I want to put some money into that. And the main concern about savers and investors is, where's my security? So the answer is, well, you buy it, you get it through tokenized ownership. And that's a very secure, a very public way of giving people ownership, and it can be secured on the blockchain as well. So anyone can look at that if they want. So all of that is very good news for savers and investors. So, well, what about the people who want to live and build this way? They want to own their property. So we'll be bringing that in a little bit later. Let's look at the flows of added values. So we have people plus technology producing products and services to bring in money in the form of multiple income streams. And we have the tokenized ownership, and we have the tokens produced from the community in terms of their resource-backed token. Well, they can be exchanged. And it also means that each and every house and each and every community that is operating with these currencies can also be selling them. So we have also a decentralized token exchange also. And all of this is woven together through contracts. And in this case, what we're proposing is smart contracts, things that people can just check the boxes and say, hey, my house is going to be exactly the same size, but the local price for the materials is different and the local price for the land is different, etc. And any differences are quite simply flagged up. So, and then you can say, well, the reason that we're using a different material is that, hey, in our part of the world, straw bale doesn't make any sense, for example. So it's all very flexible and able to be modified. And we can do a further swap, which is that through the smart contract, we can say, hey, as the resource-backed currency gets put into the exchange, then it can be automatically swapped for the token of ownership. And what that means is that the people who build and live this way, who agree to the model, end up owning their property. And it also means that there's an exit strategy for the investors. They can then use their resource-backed tokens to either spend in the community or go to the local exchange and exchange it back to fiat. So that means the operators become the owners as well. And what we're aiming to do is to level off this playing field, which is traditionally heavily stacked on the side of the people who've got loads of money, and consider it that they're taking the biggest risk, so that we've got actual mutuality between all of the parties to the benefit of all of the parties. So let's have a look at the benefits now. Resilience. Super resilience, resilience in depth, because you're no longer reliant on the energy grid, you're no longer reliant on the food logistics chain, you're no longer reliant on a collapsing fiat money system, you're no longer relying on a collapsing economy around you, and you've got a house that's earthquake proof, hurricane proof, EMF proof, EMP proof, etc. And a vastly improved quality of life at the same time, including the healing technologies, the water itself, and the freshness and quality of the food that we'll be getting. And the whole thing, because it's going to be measured, is then also based on stable economics. So what does that mean in practical terms? In practical terms, it means that probably we're looking at a situation where one of the communities that we're looking to build will pay for itself in probably about 6 or 7 years. The hardest situation is your own house, just standing on its own. And at the moment, the figures are leading us towards a repayment period of something like 8 years. That's not bad. And pure water and low waste, vastly reduced waste. And the implication of growing up to 20 times more food indoors than outdoors. And let me just explain that. I spoke to one of the top aquaponics suppliers in the US a few years ago, and he said, Mike, we've got a farm next door to us, and they grow lettuces, and they grow 20,000 head of lettuce per acre per year. He said, we don't grow on multi-levels or in pipes or anything like that. We grow flat indoors, but in a semi-enclosed and protected environment. And he said, we produce 1 million. So work it out for yourself. It means a heck of a lot of land can just be left for nature to rebalance itself. So let's have a look at the consciousness tools now. Don't be put off by the wording of any of this. The key is, hey, if we can help people to change their lives and move away from survivability, how do I pay my mortgage? How do I feed my children? What am I going to do because my pension's been wiped out? Then people can relax more and have a far better quality of life. So if we can move them from survivability to thrivability, then they're going to be in a much better position to use the tools of Dr. Andreas Yell, who's the co-chair of Pleasant Quantum Rise. And he's kind of like a Greg Braden, Joe Dispenza, Lynn McTaggart kind of character. He dwells in the field of consciousness. And what does it mean? It means that he's got some tools very similar to meditation to help people to relax when they're stressed. And also then to get a bit of perspective and distance on the programs and the stresses and the triggers that tend to take them into childhood traumas and things like that. And if we can deal with that kind of stuff, then we've got the capacity to develop the kind of thoughts that make a completely different reality for ourselves. And this is what he calls the quantum consciousness. My contribution is more on the collective side, which is organization. And this links into my background, but one of the things that I saw when I started to look at developing PQR 8 years ago was, we've got some problems with some of the technology developers and inventors. We've got some problems with most what you might call eco or conscious or spiritual communities. Very, very dysfunctional governance structures. And I use that word lightly. I know some people, don't like the principle, but the aim is, hey, whenever we get it together as a group, whether we're playing a board game or whether we're playing community, we need to have some common sorts of rules that we use between us. So the intention is that these are completely flat, completely fair, very simple, completely transparent as well. But what it gives us is especially simple processes to try and avoid the traps of having a poor structure, poor processes, because where you've got a poor structure and poor processes, especially in something as close to home as community, then what drops into that vacuum typically ends up being politics and personality. And it's quite a toxic thing to throw into that situation. So with a good, fair structure and with decent processes, we can avoid a lot of problems from occurring in the first place. We can make nice, quick decisions when we're able to, and that's really important, because otherwise people get very dragged down and very depressed if we spend 6 months discussing the color of the front door and we still don't get to a solution. And we have longer, deeper, slower processes for when people get upset and when they get stressed. And when I talk about a word like organization or leadership or something like that, or a system, I might not necessarily mean the system that is making you feel stressed and unhappy about the whole thing. So the whole thing can knit together then into a global network, because all the information is going to be absolutely free, open source, documented. Change it how you like, do what you want with it. It's our gift for everyone. What we want to do is to prototype this in terms of a retrofit of an existing house, a new build house, a small community new build, an abandoned village in France, Spain, or Italy, and not necessarily a big one, 6, 8, 10 houses, something like that, and an existing eco community or spiritual or conscious community where they say, hey, yeah, okay, we don't have the money, we don't have the plan, we don't have the access to technology, and we don't really have the governance structures either. So we'll agree this, we'll be the people to road test this in terms of how does it work for us. So all the information is then detailed, the costs, the time, the payback periods, the techniques used, etc. And you can then work out how you want to apply this for yourself. So our job is to structure the data and make it as simple as possible for absolutely as many people as possible to engage with it. And it's all going to be based on proven processes and open data. It's for absolutely everybody. It means that we can move from reliance on the grid, the food logistics chain, the financial system, which is going up in flames, the economy, etc., to self-reliance, and more than that, abundance, thrivability. And the intention is then, hey, if we've got a community, say, in the US or in Norway or something like that, it may not make the greatest sense to be growing your own olive trees. But there'll be an automatic connectivity to houses or communities in, say, Greece or Spain or Italy who do. And then you can say, hey, I want to order some of your olives, and by the way, I want to order some of your olive oil. We can pay you now in a common currency. We know that that currency has been generated from our own surpluses. And we've also got a lot more in common in terms of, hey, we've adopted at least some of this model, and we have an understanding between each other about what we're trying to achieve and the values underneath all of this. So let's put the whole thing together now. So we have people who decide, hey, I like this idea, I like the model, I'm going to agree the contract, and we're going to build a house. And we're probably going to bring in as much of this stuff as we possibly can. Then we have the people who want to do the communities with their eco cafe restaurant and etc. More revenue streams. And on the other side of the contract, we've got investors, we've got savers, we've got technology providers, and they say, hey, we quite like this idea too, because you know what, if we're savers, where are we going to put our money that it's going to be protected for the future and maybe give us a return? If we're investors, what are we going to do if the financial and economic system is collapsing? If we're technology and service providers, if no one's got any money, who are we going to sell to? So they decide, okay, we're going to put some money in. It goes in, again, according to the smart contract, which has been agreed by all the parties. That is tokenized. They get the initial ownership and security of the project. The projects then start to produce multiple revenue streams. Some of that is converted into the PQR, crypto coins, the resource-backed currency. The coin swap takes place, and we now have an exit strategy which is convertible back into fiat if necessary, though they'd probably be mad in a couple of years' time if the dollar and the pound and the euro go up in flames. But nevertheless, they have that option if they want to. And everyone moves from survivability to thrivability. So that's the presentation. I just want to show you a quick couple of bits of detail that we've been going into, just to give you an idea about this, because there's some quite interesting stuff. Can you see the aquaponics unit now?
Can you hover over it with your mouse, please?
Okay, I'll tell you what, I'm just going to, I'll just reset that and I'll share screen again. Here we go. Can you see it now?
Yeah.
Now we can see it, yeah.
Right. So there's been a lot of work to put into how do we grow enough food for a family of 4 year-round, indoors, and have the widest possible variety of crops at the same time. And this is what I came out with. Those who are familiar with the terminology, it's using IBCs, which are these grey blocks at the top and on the right and jutting into the middle. An IBC is an intermediate bulk container. It typically contains about 1,000 litres. It's around about a square yard. In real terms, it's 1.2 metres by 80 centimetres. And basically, this white plastic cube is used for transporting drinks and olive oil and things like that. And it comes in a cage. So what you can do is you can buy them, chop them in half, and then you've got the capacity to grow in these things. So I'm not going to go in depth into the aquaponics side of things, but I wanted you to see what we're looking at is growing up to 4 peppers in each bed, sweet peppers, cherry tomatoes, broccoli, beefsteak, tomatoes, sugar snap peas, aubergines, cucumbers, courgettes or zucchinis, broccoli again, and having the fish then above the sump tanks, and the water is taken from the fish to feed the plants, and the plants and the bacteria purify the water. It goes back into the fish tank, and then you've got the representation of the vertical towers on the left, which is the red cubes, and as you see, growing strawberries because my daughter's very keen on them, and kohlrabi, mixed beds, cauliflowers. They're not full-size cauliflowers grown in drain pipes, upright drain pipes. These things are probably about the size of a baseball, something like that. And then we've got onions and herbs. And just north of the fish, what you see is 2 trolleys. So the trolleys are a separate system. They can be wheeled around. And for those who don't know, microgreen growing can be tremendously lucrative, actually. People are making fortunes in small areas with this, and they're highly nutritious. But the aim is that we've got a trolley with multiple layers and lights on that can be used for growing the seedlings and the microgreens. And then another trolley just has probably 3, maybe 4 layers of carrots as well. We're just going to show you the kind of drill down of depth of detail we're going in here. So we want to make it easy as well for people. So these media beds are full of little round clay pellets. And the intention is that we put a flower pot in a flower pot. Why is that? Because then when one of the plants is finished with its production, it can be cut down and we can easily remove it without damaging the roots of the other plants. We can take out the roots, shake off the media, put it back in the pot, drop it back into the bed inside another pot. And we're thinking about how to make this as easy as possible for people to manage. So it's a pleasure, not a chore. And then even having the trays so that they can be self-watering and we can see the levels. So when we're growing things like the carrots on the trolleys, etc. So that is part 1 of the presentation. You should have the big picture now. And yeah, would anyone like me to go into, maybe would it be of interest? What have I done, or how did we get here? Where did the thinking come from, etc. Or is it just a mad idea I woke up with one morning? Yeah. Okay.
I would just recommend to see if there's any clarifying questions or initial sort of questions while everything's fresh, and then you can weave in your answers if it's appropriate. You can weave in some of your background, and so let's just see first if there's any massive questions or inquiries. There were a couple of questions in the chat that we could start with.
And also, I wanted to make a brief comment, Brett and Mike, which is that our next speaker, who was scheduled for top of the hour, 23 minutes from now, I just got a text from him. He has to cancel because he has some stuff going on. So bottom line, there is no time constraint. So feel free to go long with questions, with additional presentation. And Mike, I think I speak for everyone here. We are blown away. And what this looks like is a complete holistic redesign of humanity's entire set of living arrangements. No longer do we have to go out into these virgin forests and, and kill and plow and totalitarian agriculture, to quote Daniel Quinn, etc. So, Mike, you are our new favorite rock star. And the fact that you're a friend of Brett's automatically makes you a friend of.
I knew my mantle wasn't going to last long. It was fun while it lasted.
No, hey man, I still got a lighter. Now I just have 2 lighters, one for Mike and one for Brett. So, all right. And Sarah's got some comments. But back to you, Mike, if you want to, give some additional framing or just go straight to questions. And I'm happy to organize and feed you the questions or in other words, we sometimes have a queue, and I'll take care of that. So you can just focus on answering questions and presenting. Back to you, Mike.
Thank you. Yeah, great. Well, I'm glad you like it. So yeah, let's pick up a couple of comments from the chat. So does the model build new dwellings or use existing structures and modify them to create an eco-friendly habitat? Both is the answer. So where you've got an existing dwelling, there are various options, but the simplest one is you can coat the building in the breathable EMF, EMP-proof material. Now, it doesn't necessarily make a non-breathing building into a breathing building. It might do. One of the issues in Canada a few years ago was that they were starting to build these super insulated homes with a lot of plastic around the insulation inside the walls. And I think it was quite famous in the end because it led to the bankruptcy of one of Canada's biggest construction companies, because they realized they were throwing these homes up, and after only a few months they were absolutely full of mold. So it was just a fundamentally flawed model. So we can't cope with things like that. But if you've got a typical sort of concrete kind of or brick kind of building, then yes, it can be easily coated, and that will make it EMF proof, EMP proof, etc. And it's a naturally breathable material as well. And I understand that actually even there are some cements, certainly around this part of the world, where they use it with old buildings, where there's some sort of additive that they put in, or it's a special kind of cement that makes cement, normal cement, breathable. So there are some options cropping up there. So yes, the answer is we want to make this for as many people as we possibly can, and yes, it will be something that we want to test as a retrofit. So when we say fish tank, we mean fish tank. It doesn't mean you need to eat the fish, but there are fish actually that are quite friendly and like to be petted. So the issue there is that what most people don't know is that, first of all, aquaponics is much more productive than hydroponics. But secondly, hydroponics also involves flushing mineral waste out of the system, typically every 2 to 3 weeks. And that's a problem. It's not necessarily the best sort of solution for the environment. So, but it doesn't mean that everyone has to follow this model. Back to one of those basic principles. If it doesn't resonate with you, think about how you can adapt it for your own needs. You could be using bioponics, creating your own, worm compost or compost tea and things like that. Or you could be using hydroponics. But you just need to be aware of what are the implications of this particular system for what we want to achieve. So the fact is that fish and other creatures don't grow unless they're happy. So it becomes of primary importance to have whatever you've got, whether it's your plants or your fish or whatever, in a condition and in a place that they are able to thrive also. Whether you want to eat them or whether you want to pet them is up to you. You could say, well, putting fish in a relatively small area is cruel. You have to make your own judgment on that. But my understanding of fish is that they like to be together with other fish. The light isn't even always that important for them, but getting fed, having a stable environment, having good quality food, good quality water, things like that, is probably something that not many fish on the planet benefit from at the present time. There's another side effect though. The more we grow our own fish and try and do everything to the best standards and the best quality we possibly can, then the more actually we're encouraging the oceans and the rivers and things like that to rebalance themselves, because we do know there is a big problem there as well. So ultimately, we need to think about what's right for us, what resonates for us, and make the right choice for yourself. But you are encouraged to rethink, redraw any part of what we're doing and do what you feel is right for yourself. It's as simple as that. So we're not here to preach. We're just here to try and produce information and help as many people as possible and lash some infrastructure together. And if we do that, then I think it's going to be good for the planet, the wildlife, and ultimately the rivers and the oceans as well. That's certainly the intention. Any more questions?
Beautiful. We got a couple of questions. Go ahead, Melissa, and then Sarah also has her hand up. Go ahead, Sarah.
Yeah, hi, Mike. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your awesome presentation. I studied architecture at the Architectural Association in London, started back in the late 70s. So what you're talking about was talked about a lot there at that time. We had Paolo Soleri and a lot of other great guys there talking about terre paille in French, the hay and straw mud construction. And a couple of things, I imagine you're familiar with Rudolf Steiner's work. And one thing I wanted to ask you is if you'd looked into flow forms, which is a natural way of purifying water using a rocking motion. And he did a lot of work around flow forms. And the other thing that I believe the anthroposophists have really explored is using different colored tissue papers to wrap fruit and veg in, because color actually will it does something to the light, the spectrum, and slows down the process of vegetables and fruits decaying. So you don't have to refrigerate them, you don't have to spray them with anything. So I just wanted to mention that. And then a last quick thing, just a little story about a fish that I had. My daughter got a little feeder fish. It was a tiny little goldfish. And he was kind of rescued. And we had him in a bowl and he started growing. And so I put him in a big tank. And the tank kept getting slimy. So I thought, well, I better go get this guy a pump and get him aerated, and kept improving the architecture for the fish. And I put the pump in and it was really loud. It was like this. I'm like, oh my God, I bet that fish just doesn't like that. So I called him Fishny, and I went up to the tank and I go, hey, Fishny, you know, I want to help you out here. Is that pump driving you nuts? And I said, I'm human, so you got to show me in a way that I can understand, because I don't really speak fish. And I kid you not, he swam up to right to my face and he goes like this. He did a silent scream. I was like, dude, I'm so sorry. And I whipped that pump out of there as fast as I could. And I went and got a whisperer. So he was happy, and he actually got to be huge. He was such a happy fish. I don't really like keeping animals in captivity, but back in those days, you know, as I said, he was a rescue. They are sentient beings, just something to remember always.
Yeah, absolutely, definitely. Yeah. So, well, great points as well. Thank you very much for raising those. Yeah, I'm aware of the flow forms. I've heard about the tissue paper as well, and it's really useful and interesting information for people to to dig into and start to experiment with. The hope is that actually with this kind of system, whether it's like the the more industrial scale growing for a community, you could even be just picking to order for people. So, absolutely maximum freshness and quality. And one of the things we want to measure is the mineralization, the nutritional value, and the enzyme value of the crops that are made this way as well. And then, as a byproduct, it's going to be, well, how long does it last? Because the figures that I got were in the US, the time from picking to eating of fresh food is typically 16 days. And there's a slight problem with that, because after 10 days, 60% of the nutritional value is gone. Mm-hmm. And then 30% of that also just goes straight into waste. So this is all really important. I mean, the implications of this for pollution, the food logistics chain, quality, then you've got the chemicals and the coatings and the radiation treatment of food and stuff like that as well. So if we can cut that off at the pass and have absolutely best quality, then I think the other thing is that here's a really important point, actually. So let's say we've got a billionaire listening to this, and at the moment your plan against economic and financial and social collapse is a bunker. Well, my question to you would be, how deep is your bunker? Because if you're going to have a bunker, then you really need to have a security team. Otherwise, everyone's going to want to get into your bunker, aren't they? And but that's a slight problem as well, because you may be a security guy and you may be getting phenomenally well paid, but hey, what are you going to spend it on if the whole of the rest of the world is going to hell in a handbasket? And isn't it more important that you've got a wife or a girlfriend or a partner or children or family or friends on the outside? Well, maybe you'd better start thinking about getting another security team to look after your first security team. It's not going to work, is it? Now, the beauty about this model is that you can say, hey, come here to your local community. I'm going to share everything, to do with this model with you. I'm going to get it funded as well. And you're now going to start to bring a community together around you. Now imagine the next iteration of this, which is that you're all living in abundance and people start to come in from outside. Well, the traditional view again is to build a wall, build a castle, and keep them out and fight them off with pointy sticks and stuff like that. But instead, with this model, you can say, hey, come in, have a meal. Let us tell you about everything that goes on here. And if you're interested and if you like the idea, we'll give you the information for free. We'll connect you to the technology sources. We'll help to get you funded. We will provide you the necessary help and expertise to make this happen for your community as well. And imagine just flipping that switch and reversing the polarity and the impact then through adopting this kind of system for people to now find that actually we can be empowered by working together. It doesn't mean we need to be clones of each other or anything else like that. It just means that, hey, my passion could be gardening, or it could be healing people with the healing technologies, it could be demonstrating the technologies or something, or it could be making art or writing poetry or something. But there's a place for everyone in this system, and the beauty is that it's an encouragement to connect together people and money and technologies and philosophy and values and things that can transform the world, one person at a time if necessary, one house at a time, or one very small community at a time. But the key benefit of it is that openness and inclusivity. So rather than locking the doors, we're actually inviting people in, because it's to our interest to grow this model and to spread it with others as much as possible, and to modify it according to what our values and our hearts say, and our particular circumstances as well. So yeah, how did we get here?
Oh, 1 second, Mike.
Yeah.
I think, Sarah, did you have a question? Jamin, did you say Sarah might have raised her hand in the back end?
Yeah, I think he's about to answer how he got to this, the creation of this model of present quantum. But my question is, why would you, I know that you talked about hydroponics not being sustainable in that sense with pouring the minerals out, but I don't understand why you're even putting fish into this equation at all. And also why you want to build new homes versus taking existing and making it, having solar radiation and everything that we're already doing now, and just using existing methods. And I'm lost a little bit about where you're getting your, I don't know. I mean, like, have you used this model yourself personally at where you live now? You grow your veggies inside? Do you have all of this going on? And now, and you're vegan, 100% vegan, because I can't understand how we're going to get to a vegan world 2026 where I don't see that this fits into Vegan 2026 model. I think that it's something that you want to fit into Vegan 2026 model, maybe, but I don't see some of your steps as fitting in to a normalized, compassionate society. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I know there's other people that agree with me. I'm not the only one on this that is going to have this question, but I'm not saying that your model is bad or anything. I'm just saying that, what have you seen recently that has shown that this could be workable, and why did you choose this versus what can already be, it's already going towards the vegan world?
I just want to ask a clarifying question. I'll jump in. Jamin or Sarah or someone else could give context. I don't know if Mike knows I don't know where the Vegan 2026 came in. There's a transition. There was a call just before about this vegan, whatever it is, they're just, I feel like there needs to be a little context, either for Mike. I don't even know what the Vegan 2020, I don't know where that came from, Sarah, and I don't mean that disrespectfully. I just mean like that came from left field for me. I'm sure, and I've heard a little bit because of Dharmendra's work, so I'm sure for Mike it pretty much came out of left field. So if someone could, at least Sarah, yourself, or Jamin, contextualize that in some way, that would be really helpful.
Sure.
I'm sure Jamin could probably do it better than me. I mean, I just don't feel like addressing that because I've been to 2 Vegan 2026 conferences. So I'm kind of like already know that whole path there. So I'm familiar with it, but Jamin can explain it better in layman's terms to Mike.
And where Mike is coming from is not anti-vegan, let's say, but he's also not working on a vegan specialized project. I mean, so he didn't come into this presentation addressing Vegan 2026 or anything like that. So as also background.
Yeah. So, so just partly as background, this very community that you're now experiencing, the Collective Intelligence Block Party, a number of the members of this community are vegan and came from Vegan World 2026. Having said that, this is not an exclusively vegan community by any means. It's everyone is welcome. All ideas are welcome, et cetera, et cetera. So the vegans, please feel free to express yourselves as vegans. Non-vegans likewise. So it's all good. I just wanted to give you a little bit of context, but we are by no means constrained in any way in these conversations that we must be doing anything like that.
I want to add something to that, though, if I may. I think Mike and Brett, it would be really probably interesting and informative for you to check out the work of Dr. Sailesh Rao. And we can put in the chat the contact, and actually go on climatehealers.org and check it out, because it's a very beautiful, I'm not going to call it a philosophy, but way to move forward on the planet without, which is moving into a place of compassion and not hurting animals. So it's plant-based, plant-focused, not based on industrialized agriculture, which we all know is hurting the planet. So I would definitely check it out. I think it could, maybe you could, it will be transformative for you with the work you're doing, and actually make it even more extraordinarily beneficial for humans, but also for all species on the planet and Mother Earth herself.
Understood. Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Part of the intention of this is to, it is a model where we're saying, hey, modify it how you want. That's really important. The aim is to make it as open to as many people as possible. Some people have difficulty going down the vegan route. It could be philosophical, it could just be an intellectual or emotional blockage, but there are also practical issues. Let me just explain. I live in a bed and breakfast actually at the moment, outside a little village in Austria. The buses to the local town for a lot of the year leave at either 6 o'clock in the morning or at midday, and come back at midday or 6 in the evening. So that's not really very convenient. There is a little local shop, but I can't even get carrots in there some days. Broccoli is unusual. Cauliflower is unusual. I can get onions every day, but there are two concerns for me. The massively limited local food produce in terms of variety is significantly less than I'm used to in England, for example. So mushrooms are not there every day, things that I absolutely take for granted. So I've got an ultra limited amount of food that's fresh, and a lot of the quality of that that's fresh is also poor. So, fresh broccoli is hard. It is not soft and squashy. It's full of water and it's full of nutrition. So that is a very real world situation and practical problem for a lot of people. So there's nothing to stop people from adopting hydroponics or bioponics. That can be built into the model as well, and we'd welcome that data coming from absolutely anyone. So it's not meant to undermine or discredit veganism or anything else like that. My view is that probably when people start to experience the quality of food in this kind of environment, whether it is hydroponic, bioponic or aquaponic, and they experience the freshness of it and they want to do it themselves, then the chances are that they'll be much more readily persuaded to go vegetarian. My daughter is vegetarian, my ex is vegetarian, but still most people aren't vegetarian at the present time, and they've got concerns whether they're real or not about their diet and getting protein in and stuff like that. So what I view this as is actually being a great step in terms of moving a hell of a lot more people towards that. One of the issues is, hey, if you're going to have to rear your own food and then you're going to have to prepare it for the pot, then it is back to principles that our grandfathers and great grandfathers and and forebears had to deal with. Now, I think that a lot of people will not want to deal with that, and they'll have to come to terms with the fact that what they put on a plate, whether it's a fish or it's a piece of meat or something like that, has come from an animal. And I think that actually, that's a piece of reality as well. It's not just something that comes in a packet from a supermarket. So the honesty, in fact, of having to look at those issues and deal with these issues is going to catch up with a lot of people. And I see this as actually being something that can cater to all of the nutritional questions that people might have and objections, and then probably lead them into being much more interested in their food, whether it's fruit or vegetables or fish or meat or anything else like that. So in that respect, I can put my hands up and I can say it doesn't support a strictly vegan agenda. It's not designed to support a strictly anything though. It's designed to support as many people as possible and say, follow your heart, adapt the model how you feel it's important, and follow your own values. So I would love to get hydroponics and bioponics information into the system as well. So yeah, you know, though that's the way I'm feeling about it, that actually probably it's going to be a big leap forward for people who are remotely interested in vegetarianism or veganism.
So the other big questions, Mike, were why build new with all the structures that are already out there? And then have you ever done this before? So where are you coming from? So it's a good opportunity to talk about your space, the space in England, and the idea is to actually take it very slow, prototype it, improve it. So you're not needing billions of dollars or billions of hours. The idea is to actually go and do the first instance of it, whether it's by you or someone out in Seattle who's got space who wants to do, you know, an experiment together. So you can, yeah, I think those are the two big questions Sarah asked as well.
Yeah, there are big problems in so many areas of modern life, and construction is one of them. So we do want to do a retrofit of an existing house. So we're very much looking at that and catering to that. But we've also got to do something more difficult. And the more difficult in this case is building at least one new house so that we get the data on both the costs and the time and the skills and the techniques and the tools and everything taken into an existing house retrofit situation and how that applies to a new house build situation. If not, we're leaving a yawning gap in our data. So that's the rationale for building a new house as well, and for building new communities also, because a lot of the existing housing and a lot of the existing communities are not built to last, are very poor quality, and have inherently loads of problems with them. So there's black mold in this building here that I live in. That's not good. It's the energetic properties of the building aren't good for people or for plants or for animals either. What we want to do is to see whether a retrofit can change some of those parameters, and also do the new build as well. So otherwise we just, you know, we've got to help people to move along this path as they want. So again, it's not about being prescriptive about it. It's not about, you know, laying down the law or supporting any kind of values or anything like that. It's intended to be quite deliberately, completely political and agenda neutral, apart from it's good for people, it's good for the planet in general. So are any of these things being used? That's a really great question. The answer is that most of these things are being used, but the amazing thing for me is that no one has gone through the exercise of going, well, what's the very best option in terms of buildings and building materials? What are the very best options in terms of food grain? What are the very best options in terms of energy, and not just energy, but energy cleanup? So because the problem is that the kind of energy that we have flowing through the walls in our buildings and stuff is also energy that is actually not harmonic. It causes, again, electromagnetic field damage to people and to animals and to plants and things like that. So the job here is integration. It is trying to select carefully and wisely, ideally the best of the best, though if you're not familiar with absolutely everything, that's an impossibility. But where did this come out of? In around 2010, I was working for an NGO that was very concerned with paradigm changing technologies, and I was in conversations with some quite amazing scientists and doctors and inventors and people like that. And what I found was that a lot of these technologies were being violently suppressed. And I ended up leaving that organization, but people ended up then contacting me, and I formed something called the Universal Trust. And a trust is a flat organization. It's where the chair of the group is the servant of the group, actually. So I'm the guy who does the legwork, and it's the group who makes the decisions. And that's designed to help to identify, nurture, protect, and connect to the people these paradigm changing kind of technologies. And the kind of people that I work with and have worked with are people who have had attempts on their life, who've had to leave their countries in some cases, who've had their labs burned down, their colleagues killed, things like that. So those are realities, unfortunately. And so the Universal Trust was set up to achieve this. And part of the journey then was, okay, so how do we connect these technologies with people? And of course, looking at the eco-conscious spiritual villages, then you think, that's probably a pretty good place to start. And then I looked at them and I found real big problems with almost all of them in terms of the way they decide things, their governance structure, for want of a better phrase, how they self-organize. So then I'm going, okay, well, there is no point in throwing either good money or good technology at bad organization. And I saw the same thing very much reflected with a lot of the inventors as well, except highlighted by great paranoia and fear, and justifiably so, in terms of what they knew was happening to people that they had heard about or they've been working with and stuff like that. So the thought then is, okay, well, even if we can connect these things together, then we certainly need this sort of organizational structure put together. And I'll weave that into my story about, my story, if you like, in a little while. And the next one is, okay, well, even if we do that, how on earth are we going to get to pay for this? And the logical answer for that is, well, we structure in abundance, we structure in surplus, so that actually they are able to pay for themselves. So that was the first step. And everything else really sort of developed from there in terms of Pleasant Quantum Rise. My journey, try not to beat me up too hard, because I was younger once. I'm 57 now, and I was foolish once, like all young men are. So in my early 20s, well, I went to university. I did a degree in politics and economics and foreign policy and stuff like that. I ended up becoming a management consultant for FTSE 100 companies in the 1980s. And that was a really strange thing. It all happened through a social contact, through my dissertation that I wrote at university. Then I was given a load of psychometric tests, and I ended up in a really bizarre situation at the age of 21 and 22, setting up, running and troubleshooting stuck projects for FTSE 100 companies, the top 100 companies in the UK. And if that's not bad enough, it was in the 1980s, which was absolutely ruthless and cutthroat. And if you didn't hit your targets and you didn't do it all properly and on time, then you were cast off, basically. So I did that, and I was surprisingly good at it, despite the fact that I actually knew absolutely nothing whatsoever about what I was dealing with. I had some experiential transfer from the colleagues that I was working with, but my big gift was being able to ask really good questions. And it's kind of like an emperor's got no clothes situation when you ask really good questions, and especially when you go, well, what are you trying to do? And then going, well, in an ideal world, you'd actually be doing it that way instead. So I left management consulting. I became a market analyst. I went traveling around the world, and I came back and I joined the British Army. I trained to be an army officer, and there was a very high injury rate in those days, and I got pensioned out during the officer training element. So and one thing I realized about that environment was that I'd been selected for the very things that actually they wanted to bash out of me as quickly as possible, which was being able to ask awkward questions and come up with creative solutions to things. And I was in there for the wrong reasons. I was actually quite an idealist, and I believed that actually, you know, you could take the right action and not end up killing people in certain situations. So I was quickly disabused of my idealism, and what I realized was actually I'd been selected to go quite far in the army, and that was it was much more likely that I'd be out very quickly rather than up the ladder. And if I was going to be up the ladder, I'd probably have to compromise in lots of ways that was completely unacceptable to me. So I did as you do, and I became a photographer in the 1990s, and got involved in digital photography. I ended up winning a few prizes there as well, and ultimately created a digital photography training package because something in me made me feel that digital photography was going to be a revolutionary change, even when Kodak and Fuji were saying it will never replace film. So during the course of that process, what I realized was that there was a huge amount of disagreement about how to control and manage quality in digital photography. So I made a digital photographer's training course, and ultimately that disagreement led to me chairing the first international multi-industry quality guidelines for digital photography and graphic artwork. And I was dealing with a very, very disparate group of people, from quality management professionals to people from Epson and companies like that, to, you know, manufacturers, to trade bodies, to, you know, all sorts. But it worked really well, and it worked on a completely flat organizational principle, which was I was there to serve the group, and the group made their decisions, and that kept it on a very, very clean course as well. It wasn't moved to one side in terms of put our product in there, base what you're doing all around our product. That was just negated by the whole process. And in the meantime, I'd been put in the path of the venture capitalists and the banks. And I ended up steamrolled by them. I ended up homeless. I was one step from literally being out on the streets. I was living in a car. I lived in a friend's office. One Christmas, I was living in houses being renovated around me, and ultimately I ended up living in a squat. And that tends to change your values a little bit, and to give you a bit of a different insight into life. And it developed me a lot, in short. So I ended up working for this NGO. I ended up leaving, forming the Universal Trust, and now we've got Pleasant Quantum Rise coming out of it as well. So the proven bits of the model was also raised. I've used certain things. I've used some of the world's most advanced energy healing technologies on myself and others for about 15 years or so. I've used some of the plant growing technologies. I've got a fantastic network of people, scientists, doctors, engineers. I've had conversations from time to time with Nobel Prize winning scientists, though that is not a year-to-year, never mind a day-to-day kind of activity. And it's given me insights via those people and through my own experience about how things really work, about frequencies, for example, about our relationship to energy and water, and not just each other, but the universe itself, I guess you could say, in a spiritual or a metaphysical or a quantum physics kind of sense. So I was a very, very foolish and arrogant young man, and I got battered for it. And I had my rough edges knocked off, and I tried then my best to be a much better human being than I started off. So are all of the elements proven? Almost all the elements are proven. The really interesting thing for me is, for some reason, and I can't understand it, why has no one put all of this stuff together? And when we're talking about the food technologies, there's 6 or 7 or 8 that we can put together. And one of the things I want to do is to have one indoor environment which has none of them, and one which has all of them, and then start to measure the results between the two, but also proving the technologies, but also to find out if we If the hypermineralized rock minerals, for example, substitute almost orbitally rearranged monoatomic elements, what if we take one of these out? Does the whole thing still perform in the same way? So this is the importance of actually doing it and prototyping it and issuing all of the information for free as well, the real world data, because that's what people don't have at the moment. So, you know, I'm quite happy to be a guinea pig. And just for your information about how we are looking at this as a team, we made a team agreement. And that is that what do we get paid out of this? We get paid the average salary of a German worker. Nothing more, nothing less, average. I've got zero savings. I've got a daughter to look after, but that's what we've agreed. There are no perks on the side. So but you say, you know, you'll get yourself a free house. No, I won't, because I'm going to prove the contractual side of the model as well. And that means that I'm going to have to run it in the way that I've described it and experience it in all of its aspects as someone who's actually effectively poor and just living on an army pension, which just about, no, it doesn't really cover my monthly costs and my commitments. It doesn't mean I can do too many nice things and treats for my daughter. It doesn't mean I can afford to run a car, for example. But it's been a bloody good experience, and it means that we can cater to people who are in a really similar position where they've got absolutely nothing. So I'll prove the contract, I'll prove the model, I'll prove absolutely everything. And if there are any mistakes, I want them built into the first prototype so that they're not built into anything that happens after that. And that's why I'm really, really working very, very hard to make sure that the first one is going to be at least basically functional, if not an absolute storming success. And I want it to be a storming success. But whatever lessons need to be learned, how do we do this better next time? Everything is going to be shared. That's part of the philosophy, so that we only make a mistake once and we continually improve the system. So that's really, you know, my story in a nutshell. I'm not sitting in front of you as a saint. I'm very much a sinner, but I'm trying real hard to do things better from now on, and for the future, and for other people, and for the benefit of my daughter, especially. So yeah, that's my background and how we got here, and where we are with you know, the proof and the evidence of this thing. So yeah, it's for me, it's bloody well got to work. It's got to work. I'm relying on this, and you know, my daughter's relying on me.
Thank you so much, Mike. That's such a beautiful story. You know, each one of us come from these interesting journeys here on this planet. And I just want to say that this is not my quote. I don't remember who the author of it is, but I think it's a good one for the moment. True nobility is being better than we used to be.
Wow. And what an amazing story, and what an amazing place it's taken to you, Mike. So we are just captivated, and for my part, and I know I speak for many of us, if not most of us, we wholeheartedly invite you to participate in the collective superintelligence that we're building. And in fact, what you're creating, and we can co-create together, bringing in the talents and the knowledge of our whole community. I think what you're building can become a major pillar of this new world. I mean, it's just kind of like, it's just so obvious, right? And the obviousness of your solution goes hand in hand with the obviousness of our problems. That, oh, if I want to live in this world, I have to get an SUV, fill up the tank, drive 30 miles, go do some work at some factory I don't like, and whose product or services I don't really agree with, and you know the story. And what I love about this is it brings us back down into a much smaller, more local, sustainable, healthy, happy world. And that also feels very consistent with the crisis that we're going through now and the transition. It gives us a place to land without having to go back into that hellish world that we just came out of. Anyway, love to hear everyone's comments, starting with you, Mike, and then
There's another question here as well. I can read out for Mike. And Mike, you can also mention briefly, we also have space in England. A friend of mine and Mike's and part of the project has a beautiful, beautiful piece of land in the south of England that he's still working out some zoning and things like that. But so we're not also just buying a new piece of land or wasting materials or resources in that sense. We're using the resources we have. Mike lives in a community where they can do some of this stuff. Ray's got this beautiful piece of land where we can both retrofit and try building a new house, and has big enough for an Airbnb kind of stuff. So we're using our own, resources to do some of this prototyping and work on things. So the question here was, and I'll give you a quick context, Mike, as well, is how does the project cool the planet? How is it applied when it is incorporated in a large city? Most people rent the space they live in and can hardly afford it. Incomes for older people are limited. So I'm just going to give you a little context on the question of how does the project cool the planet. One of the big projects in this space, in this community, is something called solar radiation management, which is something you'd be interested in just from the technological solution-oriented side. There's a guy, and Damien could add later, from Harvard, who some people here are like really helping and trying to back, who's got this solution with mirrors. And it's like these mirrors can actually, bounce the heat back into space. And it's one of the quickest, most trim tab ways of cooling the planet. And it's quite feasible, really, and affordable, in some scales. If we were just being practical and people wanted to help, it wouldn't be such a hard thing to do. So cooling the planet is a big topic in this group. So that's one of the reasons why someone would ask, how does the project cool the planet? Just for some context for you, Mike. And then it was, again, how is it applied when it's incorporated in a large city? Most people rent the space they live in and can hardly afford it.
Thank you. Okay, well, that is a real hot potato, so to speak, in terms of, there's so much dispute over this area. And the intention is that actually, if we are eliminating elements of, massive logistics and transportation systems, and what most people don't realize is, okay, we can see the connection between hydrocarbons and the running of lorries and ships and airplanes and stuff like that. But we don't necessarily see the connection of hydrocarbons to the manufacture of those things and the tires. And very few of us see the connection of hydrocarbons with the growing of food in terms of the pesticides, the fertilizers, and virtually everything else associated with industrial scale food growing is absolutely a very direct function of hydrocarbons. And the problem with hydrocarbons is that they are made of hydrogen and carbon, which are not problematic in themselves, but when these things are strung together in long chains, then they become massively damaging to the environment. So how does it cool the planet? By giving people ways not to be wasteful of their food and not to be reliant on those kind of modalities which are inherently so polluting to the planet. I personally believe that actually all we need to do is to let the planet, as much as possible, return back to nature. I think we're dealing with to some extent or another, a self-balancing system. It has its own cycles. I think we need to be, as someone who has deep association with systems, and that's what all of this is about. It's about connecting things together as a system. I'm very, very, it makes me think very, very deeply about how we should be intervening with the planet and with such a big and complex system. However, if we build straw bale houses, we're incorporating tons of carbon, and in a way that it gets locked up for potentially thousands of years, actually, because that's how long ago the Chinese were building their temples out of this special geopolymer material, and they're still standing 2,500, 3,500 years later. So building is an incredibly wasteful area, as well when it comes to materials also. So imagine being able to move into buildings that aren't actually designed to drop to pieces after probably 20 years or 30 years in China, or 100 years in the UK and the US. So our ability to transition to something which is deeply long-term sustainable, to deal with the pollution and the waste by absolutely cutting it off at the roots, and to let trees grow back on land, let oceans restore themselves, let nature take over again, is really, to me, a key part of the solution. I don't know about putting up, or using any technologies to manipulate the climate. But what I do know, absolutely for sure, because it's been proven, is that there are multiple methods for greening deserts. And we can do this today. One group was doing it out in Dubai with biochar, which is charcoal, basically, as an absorbing medium. Rock minerals, again. I think it was compost. And the other thing was energized water. And they were greening the desert, not in years, but in weeks to months. I know also the use of animals in terms of traditional indigenous herding kind of activities, where there is a genuine mutual relationship between the tribes people and the animals, where they take their animals over sandy areas, their droppings containing seeds and having just enough to hold some water and some nutrients and stuff like that also help to affect that. So my feeling is that as a natural byproduct, it stops artificially polluting and heating the planet. Does it cool the planet? I don't know, but my feeling is that if we let the planet look after itself, all this has been caused by man, and I think we need to be quite careful about how we deal with complex systems. And my feeling is there's nothing more powerful than Mother Nature. We know that there is a distinct role between water and cooling in the system. So my feeling is just to leave it alone and let it sort itself out. How is it applied in a large city? Well, one of the iterations that we'd like to do is looking at, there's plenty of abandoned factories and mills or offices and stuff in cities. And that would make an ideal opportunity for inner city food grain, bringing in the energy technologies, bringing in the eco cafe restaurant, bringing in the eco shop. And what I would really like in all of these projects is for the ownership to be transferred to the local community, to have a structure in that, because part of my philosophy is that if you give people responsibility, then they tend to act more responsibly. And that responsibility has to start in terms of how we look after ourselves, how we look after each other, and how we look after the planet. And if we take an extreme example, because it's something I've looked at, look at the military, boys effectively doing the most incredible things in a wartime situation, incredible bravery, incredible initiative. Let's look at the good things that can come out of that, as well as the terrible things that come out of it. And I'm a firm believer that actually if you treat people like children and you don't give them responsibility, then some people tend not to find a development opportunity there. So responsibility and giving people ownership as well is really important. We could also be looking at adapting the other ways in an inner city. There is someone that I was talking to recently who wants to look at employing this model inside a US city. And I think they're looking in a much wider sense about the buildings and things like that as well. So the rental issue, I don't know, but my guess is this. This is what I know about the current financial system. Take my whole screen. I did a presentation on this on YouTube recently as a video. There's a long one, 30 minutes, and there's a short one about 12 or 13 minutes or something like that. But there's a great graphic, all the world's money and markets in one visualization. It's absolutely jaw-dropping stuff. If you take this as representing all the money in the world, the big chunk of it is going to be derivatives. Almost everything on that chart is debt. There are only 3 things in that area that are not connected to debt, and that's physical gold, physical silver, and cryptocurrency. And the implication for me is that when these hyper-inflated bubbles, because the whole thing is debt, the whole system is debt. The US was bankrupt years ago. The UK was bankrupt years ago. I'm talking absolutely literally, it's bankrupt. And we can see how the banks have bet against each other with these derivatives and stuff. But when these markets collapse, there are some funds like pensions or mutual funds, there are some big corporations, there are some rich people who decide, how am I going to protect what I've got? And there's a pattern to this. Where do they go? Historically, in the past, they've gone into gold and silver. And with so much debt money in the system trying to flow into such tiny areas, it's going to be literally like a swimming pool trying to flow into a teacup. And what's going to happen is the money and property prices in the stock markets, according to some very, very good commentators, Charles Nenner, the former head of forecasting for Goldman Sachs, is saying an 85 to 90% collapse in the stock market and property prices. So if you're a landlord, you're going to see the value of your assets absolutely fall through the floor. Everyone who is not uber rich, I mean seriously uber rich, is probably going to be wiped out by this unless they know how this system works and how to play it. It's kind of like, you remember the old cartoon with Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner, when the coyote runs off a cliff and he's scrabbling in the air for a few seconds, and then he goes down and he hits a seesaw, and the Roadrunner's on the other side of it, and he gets propelled back up to the top of the cliff. That's pretty much exactly what happens when these markets crash. So what is going to happen is that gold and silver and cryptocurrency are going to be seen as safe haven assets, and they're going to absolutely explode in value. I don't think most landlords are going to know about that. But if we're building a system that can grow and provide resilience to as many people as possible, it may be that at some stage they go, crikey, what's in it for me? How can I adapt this for me? Well, if they accept the model in a way that's acceptable for the people who rent off them, then what could happen is that they deal with their energy, they deal with their food, they allocate their resources to help the people who are treated as parasitical prey at the moment to one extent or another. But if you kill your market and you kill your customers, then ultimately you're going to suffer. And I think this is going to be the biggest consciousness event that's ever happened on this planet. And it is going to take some suffering from some people, unfortunately. But if we can plug in solutions that they go, I can mutualize this. I've got something, I've got a property, I've got money. But I need to look after my customers. Then maybe we can create a situation where actually it can be good for all parties and they can support each other. So they could say, all right, well, I'm gonna use the collateral in my apartment block or something to sustainably change the whole system and to provide you with income. And actually, you know, we all go down with the dollar, or we all jump into a new kind of system. So people are going to be taking up parts of the model, and they already have done, and they've said, how can we apply this in urban areas, basically, and that's their baby. But they're excited by the possibilities that they see for their environment and their neighborhood and their ecological projects and stuff like that. So all I can say is that we're going to be there to help them, but they're going to do it ultimately. We're not here to create a pyramid. We're here to utterly invert a pyramid so that the people end up owning this system and are responsible for it and look after each other and look after the planet much better. So we're just trying to provide like strategic tools for things to connect together, but we can't do the thing. Ultimately, it's going to be the people who do this. We're going to prototype it and try and break the back of it in terms of the information and good quality data to work on. But ultimately, if this is going to work, it's got to work like casting seeds. It's got to be like a fractal. and people have to do it for themselves and say, hey, you made a mistake with that bit, but we fixed that, and now we're going to put this on the blockchain free for other people to be able to copy. Or, hey, we've got a much better solution for this, and that's what we want. It should be an organic, self-sustaining, growing system that modifies itself. But I'm hoping that we've put in a good foundation, and that's really what we're aspiring to do.
That's beautiful, Mike. Thank you. I have a question. What would you propose to people who don't own properties, who are renters, or who maybe don't have a backyard or garden? How do they get involved? What could be their participation to help themselves and their community? Thank you.
Great question. Great question. I think the first thing is awareness, and it's going to be kind of like, you know, that biblical thing of chucking the seed out and some of it hits stony ground at first. But when people start to realize that actually there's really something quite dramatic shifting in the financial and economic situation at the moment, then I think people are going to be wide open to this real fast. So the first thing I think is, you know, I've prepared an economic video to try and explain what's really happening in the world in reasonably simple terms and providing references. But the other one is the solution. And I'd much rather actually that people focus on the solution. And it's quicker and cleaner and better and all the rest of it. But that's the first thing is try and get people together, your community. Start to talk and start to focus people on a solution and see if we can get some traction there. If you know top executives or rich people, you know, we've got something for them as well, because what's the world going to be like if your bunker principle works? What are you going to come out to? How are you going to feel? What about your children? What about your family? What kind of a world is that going to be? Let's just skip all that stuff and jump straight into something which is a solution for everyone. So, you know, you can connect us with people as well. But that's the fundamental, is put this in front of your community and start to draw people together, because it may be that you're a bit early, but surely there's going to be more and more people knocking on your door very, very soon and wanting to get involved. So I can't prescribe a solution for a community, because we've got various, you know, many different kinds of situations. On the one hand, we've got a horror situation like Detroit, but the benefit of Detroit is there's a bucket load of empty buildings there and stuff like that are probably begging for adaptation. Then you've got the German kind of city situation, which is that, you know, they have far fewer skyscrapers than they do in the US and the UK cities. They tend to build only sort of 3 or 4 stories high, but they have a lot of courtyards and things like that, and they have a lot of parks and open space. So I can't be prescriptive about a solution, but surely the first step is, you know, start to talk to people, create a forum to get together and focus people on the issues and the fact that there are, you know, solutions. And, you know, I don't care how it works. I just want it to work. And then spread it as much as you possibly can. Yeah, that's the best I can do for a sort of a city type of situation, I think. Each one's going to have its own particular differences and stuff like that. But connection's the first point. It's got to be, yeah, and not judging, I think, is also important. It doesn't matter who you are, what you've done, or anything like that. There's something in the middle which is common to us all, which is important to us all. And you know, if we've got to find a huge slab of forgiveness in our hearts, then that's going to be a good place to start, really. You know, we can't bring judgment into a situation like this when there is so much of such importance for, you know, children, frankly, and the planet. So let's put our priorities where they are and treat this, you know, with that kind of importance and reverence, I think. Have I bored everyone now?
Not at all. Goodness.
It's
I-
wonderful.
I see nothing but interest and thumbs ups and love for you and what you're doing, Mike. Thank you.
Thank you.
Maybe we should sing a salmon song, a Haida song.
Sure. Sometimes, Mike, we do little kind of musical breaks to infuse the space with love and joy and beauty and art.
And
So,
connection.
yes.
Right. And just if I can round off that point, you know, for the recording sort of side of things. So if you're interested in looking at the I think the thing I titled it Economic Ninja or Financial Ninja on the Universal Trust, all one word, channel on YouTube. There's some pretty interesting meditations on there as well for quantum manifestation, remote healing and stuff. That might sound a little bit weird to some people, but there's some interesting little frequencies built into that stuff. If you're into meditation, then give that a shot and read the iron breath instructions underneath as well. But the PQR 8 reasons is the most important one, and I would absolutely love it if you could share the living daylights out of that and give it the thumbs up, or post questions, or say what you disagree with, or you'd like to modify in the model for yourself. So, you know, the people talking about, you know, the issues for vegans, yeah, absolutely represent them, but say, hey, I'm a vegan, I'm going to pick up on elements of this model and I'm going to make a vegan version of this model because that resonates with me. So, you know, put your solutions in there as well and they'll be picked up on.
If you put that link in the chat, Mike.
I think Nolan, is that Mike's YouTube channel you put in there?
Yes.
Universal Trust, yeah.
Mhm.
Cool, thanks, Nolan.
Thank you. Right. I just thought of
Yeah.
you, if Mike, you're okay with that, to sing a Haida song. So I carved canoes with the Haida tribe for 14 years. They're in Northwest Coast Alaskan tribe from British Columbia and Alaska.
Wow.
And, this is a salmon song, and they sing this to welcome the salmon back every year. It goes like this. And when you see a salmon, they jump, and the Haida say, "Ayo!" So you can all say it. Ayo!
Ayo!
And that's, you know, welcoming the salmon. Ayo! 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 Hawachin! Hawachin! Skolda! And chin is the Chinook, and Skolda is the steelhead. So it's saying thank you to the salmon people. They believe.
I'm so moved at that. I've got tears in my eyes actually, and I felt a complete sort of energy surge going through me here that when I heard that. So yeah, you can tell I'm sort of spluttering a little bit. So yeah, I love that. Thank you.
They believe if the salmon go, the humans will go. So always good to pray for all the animals that we want to protect, and we want them to stay here with us.
I think what I'm hoping is, and what I intend is, that abundance and resilience is going to return to nature as just a byproduct of this. It's just that we don't need to keep manufacturing all of this crap. And if we have people who have beautiful, safe, comfortable homes that resonate around them with great quality food, great quality water, the healing technologies, you know, a currency system they can rely on that supports the planet, then it's like the planet's just going to go, thank you. We can sort it all out from here. And you know, when you visit jungle places and stuff like that, and you sometimes see old cities and stuff, it's nature just takes over. So I'm sure it's going to do that job.
Thank you. And just hearing you describing that, I'm going, you know, because we're so focused on dystopia right now. And by focusing on well-being, abundance, beauty, harmony. We can create that together, co-create that, which is what you're talking about. Through the imagination, backed by our emotions, we will create it out into the world.
Absolutely. You said that impeccably. Yeah, no one can top that. That's how it's going to happen.
Well, it feels like a natural conclusion. I have to go personally, but of course, Mike, this is going to go on for another 18 hours, so you can stay all night if you want. But I just want to thank you, Mike, for coming and sharing your story and the project. For me, it's similar to the solar radiation management, actually. Like when you ask, what can we do? It's like, let's try to help each other spark our projects, because they're not meant just for one of us. They're meant to be examples of what's possible. So like for me, the best thing that can happen for everyone, like when someone asked, well, how about people that don't pay rent? The point is to prove the model, get some fire under it, get some momentum, because then the investors and philanthropists and crowdfunders and people will show up and start backing these projects in different places, city, urban or not. And then the people that don't have the rent and are asking, well, how do if I don't have land and I don't have rent? That's not the point. The point is they have the passion, the motivation to create a community like that, build houses like that, grow their own food. And they're going to be met by the people that are like, wow, I can support that. I want to support that. So it's not so much a question of, I don't have money or I only pay rent, I don't have resources. It's like getting over that hump, which is similar to a lot of these technologies, the solar radiation and the new map and this. It's like, it's just the new paradigm in general, getting to this next level over the hump where some of these things start actually, there's no more question like, does this work or is it real? It's like, did you see the community out there? Did you see the community out there? Yeah, it's working. So so thanks, Mike, for sharing and for all your hard work, like everyone that's part of this and doing the things they do. Thank you, Radish Crowd, for inviting Mike when I sent an email and asking if Mike could have a slot to share. I love you guys a lot, and I miss Fridays when it's not Friday, although it goes quite quick, I have to say. I don't know about you guys for 24 hours, because I've never done yet the 24-hour thing, but it seems like Friday shows up quite quick every Friday. So thanks a lot, and for having us and Mike and everything.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. I'm gonna go as well, because I'm English, and believe it or not, I haven't had a cup of tea all day. And it's late here, so I'm gonna have a cup of tea.
You deserve it.
Beautiful. Well,
thank you all for having me. Vegans, take the model, do what you want with it, please, and share it. Make it what resonates with you, and the same goes for anybody. If you disagree with it, just take the bits that are good and weave your own story into the bits that you want to improve. That's the intention.
Thank you.
Beautiful. And Mike, please keep coming back. We love you. We love what you're doing. We want to support it. And we'd also likewise love your input on the other projects that we're working on. This is collective intelligence. It's like one big potluck. So please, this is your home. Make yourself at home here. This is your virtual home. So please make yourself at home.
Thank you very much. If anyone, I'll try and help anyone that I can. All the work's for free. We've had an interesting time over the last few months with the website being hacked and various other things, but basically all the elements of the model are already for free. So if you want something like on team working, you might want to call it, or group organization, self-organization, I can share the conscious co-creation tools. There's a video on that on the YouTube channel as well, but I've got the document, and I'll try and help as I can, but maybe I can come back on a regular basis, because at the moment, you can tell this is my passion. I want to drive it home. I want to get it done in record time. I want it to be absolutely brilliant. I want to share it with everyone, and maybe I can come back regularly to give updates as well. But in the meantime, if there's anyone who say, I want to connect these people together, then I'm here, and I'm glad to do that, and so's Brett, and I'm blessed with having Brett as well, and some, you know, great people supporting this project.
Awesome.
Beautiful. Wonderful. All right. Well, Brett and Mike, I know you gentlemen need to go, so, but please feel free to come back. We will be going strong for another 15 hours. So
You are amazing.
yeah,
You're amazing.
we go until 6 a.m. Pacific time, which is maybe 3 p.m. in Austria or something.
Wow.
Saturday afternoon. So yeah.
Okay. My final word, I've got a tip for you. Get the kettle on.
Yeah, we've got a kettle that goes on regularly.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Brett. And
thank you, everyone. Bye for now.
Cheers.
Bye for now. We'll see you soon.
Beautiful.
All righty. I'm going to stop recording just for a moment.